Good evening and welcome to the May 6, 2019 meeting of the Pacifica Planning Commission. Let's see, can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Berman.
Present.
Vice Chair Rubenstein.
Here.
Chair Clifford.
Here.
Commissioner Niblin.
Here.
Commissioner Big Stick.
Present.
Okay, and would Commissioner Big Stick be willing to lead us in the salute to the flag?
Certainly.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the next order of agenda is the approval of the order of agenda. And I would like to point out that we have a lot of departments here for the CIP, and it might be good to change the order of agenda, get that out of the way first so that they can go home to their families. And I have a motion from Commissioner Big Stick.
Sure, I move that we change the order of agenda so that the
Consideration item
goes first on the agenda.
Okay, and Commissioner Niblin?
Well, I'll second that motion, and I take it then we would be moving approval of the order of agenda as so amended.
As so amended, that's correct. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please vote on that. Okay, and that passes unanimously. All right, moving on to approval of the minutes. Okay, Commissioner Niblin?
I'll move approval of the minutes of April 1st, 2019's Planning Commission meeting.
Okay. Commissioner Big Stick?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that passes unanimously. All right, we need to designate a liaison to the City Council meeting of 5/13, the Committees and Commissions annual report presentation. It is a 5:45 p.m. start, and I know I'm going to have to be there as the chair. If any other commissioners would like to come, I would be happy to have the company. In fact, I recommend if you can come, please be there. But I think that I will be there to give the report, so you can be certain of that part of it. All right, and now moving on to oral communications. This portion of the agenda is available to the public to address the Planning Commission on any issue within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Commission that is not on the agenda. The time allowed for any speaker will be 3 minutes. Do I have any cards, or is there anybody who is interested in speaking at oral communications? Seeing no movement, I'm going to close oral communications, and we will go to the consideration item, which is a review of the 2019 through 2024 capital improvement program for the consistency with the general plan and local coastal plan. Okay. Yeah, I have a staff report, please.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Senior Planner Christian Murdoch. Each year, the City Council adopts a 5-year capital improvement program, or CIP, which comprises the known capital projects on the horizon. The Planning Commission's role in the CIP adoption process is determining if the projects proposed are consistent with the city's general plan and local coastal land use plan, often referred to in shorthand as the LCP. The Planning Commission's role does not extend to project priorities or funding, which are determined by City Council. In the 2019 through 2024 CIP before you this evening, a majority of the projects have been carried over from previous years and were previously found by the Commission to be consistent with the general plan and LCP. The Planning Commission will need to make the consistency finding for 21 new projects summarized in the staff report. The staff report includes references from the general plan and/or LCP as appropriate to justify the consistency of the projects. Various staff from other departments are also present tonight to help answer any questions regarding the projects. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt the attached resolution finding that the 2019 through 2024 CIP is consistent with the general plan and local coastal land use plan. Thank you.
Are there any questions for staff? I'm not seeing any from the commission. I'm going to then open the public hearing. Is there anybody who would like to speak to this item? Seeing no one, I'm going to bring it back to the commission for discussion and/or a motion. I have a motion from Commissioner Berger.
I move that the Planning Commission adopt the resolution included in Attachment A, finding that the proposed 2019-2020 capital improvement program is consistent with the general plan and the local coastal land use plan.
And I have what I think is a second from Commissioner Big Stick.
Indeed you do. I will second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that passes unanimously. All you guys can go home and enjoy your evening. Okay, now, moving on to the new public hearing. We have item number 1 is PSD 829-18, site development permit, coastal development permit, use permit, variance, and vested tentative subdivision map, all which come with a bunch of numbers, and I'm not going to read them all. For construction of 7 townhomes, styled residential units in 2 buildings and subdivisions of airspace to create condominiums on a 19,470 square foot lot, vacant parcel at 1567 Beach Boulevard, and that's that. That's it. And can we have a staff report, please?
Good evening. I'm Contract Planner Ranu Agarwal, and the project before you includes the construction of 7 townhome-style condominium units at 1567 Beach Boulevard. The project would include 2 buildings, one facing Beach Boulevard and the other located to the rear of the property. The building in the front would be 2 stories and include 4 units, and the building to the rear would be 3 stories and include 3 units. The project site is located at the northern end of Beach Boulevard to its east side and it's also accessed from Beach Boulevard. Beach Boulevard is separated from the Pacific Ocean by a reinforced earthen wall, which is commonly referred to as the Beach Boulevard seawall. The project requires, as Commissioner said, site development permit, coastal development permit, use permit, variance, and a vesting tentative subdivision map. In staff's analysis, it was found that findings can be made to support the required entitlement based on the project's description and also because of the conditions of approval included by staff. Specifically with regards to the variance, there is a need to construct 7 units on the site because of the general plan designation, which is high-density residential for the site, and gives a range of 16 to 32 units per acre, and 7 to 9 units is the minimum under that designation that would be permitted on the site. Additionally, there is a fire apparatus road that would be needed on the site because of the fact that this is at the northern end of Beach Boulevard, and fire requirements say that 150 feet is the minimum distance that can be there to the furthest wall of a building for fire purposes. In order to accommodate those 2 requirements as well as the requirements of the cluster housing, the variance is, in this case, justified. Additionally, staff identified that the project is subject to various known and potential hazards, including wave overtopping, tsunami risks, and seawall failure, and requested further analysis from the project engineer on these hazards. The project engineer prepared a hazards analysis, which is dated November 27th, 2017. It's also on the dais, provided just before the meeting. And it's also at the rear table for the public. In addition, an investigation was conducted regarding the condition of the seawall fronting the project site. The project this investigation indicated that from the seawall that there was enough distance for to the buildings for wave overtopping to be addressed, even with sea level rise conditions. So there is a 25-foot setback from the front property line to the buildings, which exceeds the required front setback by 10 feet. This is in addition to the 50-foot right-of-way of Beach Boulevard. So there is a total of 75-foot distance from the seawall. And based on the applicant's analysis, 40 feet was the distance for the wave overtopping, including a 3-foot sea level rise. The front of the site would also be raised 3 feet above grade of the streets to minimize risk from inundation due to the tsunami, which is based on different tsunami scenarios. And a condition of approval has also been included to require relocation of bedrooms on the ground floor in the front building on the upper floors. And there is a requirement that structural design focus on preventing the collapse of the structure due to tsunami forces. The condition of the existing shore protection was inspected by the project engineer, and then their analysis was peer-reviewed by the city's consultant. According to the city consultant, the existing seawall will have approximately a 40-year life still remaining. Assuming that there is a similar rate of corrosion degradation that has been observed to date, the studies had found that metal straps, some of them had corroded, but otherwise the wall was in good condition. On this issue, the city's engineering staff will provide some more information shortly. We received several public comments that speak to these concerns, which are wave overtopping, flooding, erosion, and the condition and potential safety of the existing shoreline protection. In analyzing this project, staff took into consideration the hazard analysis and seawall investigation, as well as the sea level rise adaptation policies that the City Council has directed staff to include in the LCP update, but that have not yet been formally adopted. These policies reflect the express intention of the city to continue to maintain and rebuild protected devices and did not include managed retreat policies. Nonetheless, adaptive resilience measures were incorporated into the project, including increased setbacks, raised site, and conditions regarding sleeping quarters in the front building and structural collapse prevention to be engineered into the structure in case of tsunamis. So now I turn this presentation to the senior engineer Ray Dungeness for more detailed information on the seawall.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Raymond Dungeness, Senior Civil Engineer. Regarding the seawall, as you know, that there are two types of wall present here at Beach Boulevard. To the north is more of a tile wall, and to the south is more of a robust wall. So there have been two breaches in the seawall. One happened in 2002, and the one recently happened in 2016. The wall was built in 1984, and thereafter there was a little wall failure where the footing subsided and the wall had to be rebuilt. And then again, like in 2002, there was a breach right adjacent to the pier, and that was repaired. And again, the breach in 2016. So that we think is just by the brute force of the wave and the king tides was the primary cause of those failures.
I'm going to ask you a question right now, because it's right now on the tip of my tongue.
Okay.
In terms of those failures, you're saying it was the brute force of the waves, the energy of the wave that caused that failure. The failure had nothing to do with the straps then, or wasn't the underlying reason? The straps didn't fail per se, the whole wall failed.
Yeah, it was one of the, another consultant, I think it was the same consultant that noted that the force of the wave actually pushed one of the tiles in, therefore creating a void, that the water started to take away the material behind the wall, and thus creating a domino effect where all the other tiles fell.
Okay. And I want to be clear that we're talking about it as a seawall, but the portion going north is not a seawall. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's more of a earth retaining wall.
It's an earth retaining wall. Okay, I want to be very clear on our definitions. I keep hearing seawall, and I know that that particular section isn't, by definition, a seawall. Okay, I have a question from Commissioner Big Stick.
Sure, and I didn't catch it until I was going through the Cotton Shires and Associates report. There's just one sentence. We also understand that a portion of the seawall failed north of 1567 Beach Boulevard in 2016. Is that, I wasn't sure if they wrote that incorrectly, or if I just wasn't.
Could you repeat that again?
The exact quote is, and this is on page 132 of the packet, it's in the Cotton Shires and Associates report. We also understand that a portion of the seawall, heretofore known as retaining wall, failed north of 1567 Beach Boulevard in 2016.
I think it may be north of the pier instead of north of 1567, no?
I mean, specifically, it says north of 1560. I wasn't,
No?
Chair,
It would have been south of 1550.
Yes.
that's what I expected to read, which is why it caught me and why I'm following up.
Okay.
Chair, if I may, perhaps before continuing with more commissioner questions, our engineering colleagues have a few more points to raise regarding some of the public comments received.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, so like contract planner Renew said, there was an analysis of the straps, and while the analysis focuses on the straps, while the engineers was investigating the pit, they did investigate and found that that the walls and the straps behind it and the bolts and the fill were in relatively good condition. Also, there was a question regarding the maintenance and inspection of the wall. So each and every major storm event, Public Works staff does do an inspection of the wall, and we are in contract, and hopefully engineering intends to annually inspect the wall prior to the winter seasons. There was also another question regarding utilities in the public right-of-way, and specifically PG&E, and those will get reviewed when the applicant submits their plans, and each and every utility company will review the capacity of each utility and make sure that everything will be upgraded so that it will be able to provide for the 7 condo units. Also, the street closures that Public Works intermittently place along Palmetto is it's basically for safety and does not and does allow residents to access their residence during those times.
Thank you. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, Commissioner Big Stick?
If I may, I just wanted to finish up with the
Oh,
conclusion.
you still have some more. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Ray. So before we discuss the project, I just wanted to say that the project is exempt from CEQA under the infill exemption, and staff does recommend that the commission approve this project as conditioned.
Okay, and we're all tidied up now? I keep stepping on people's toes, and I don't intend to. Commissioner Big Stick, you had a question.
I have several questions.
Okay, well, please ask them.
So, following along since 2016, every month, City Council reaffirms that there's a local emergency of the coastline from Westline Drive to the end of Beach Boulevard, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and we're talking about Westline to the southern end of Beach Boulevard, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So first of all, how close to the driveway leading into the development were the sinkholes in the promenade? How close to Paloma were the sinkholes back in 2016?
I'll go ahead and let engineering staff.
It was right there, adjacent to the intersection, just along the walking path, right at Paloma, basically.
Sure. And I remember the fencing being there. While the repairs were going on, was there a substantial amount of Beach Boulevard cut off from through traffic by cars?
When the breach at 2016, basically the intersection of Beach Boulevard and Santa Maria was closed off for approximately 6 months.
Thank you. When wave overtopping events take place, I would imagine the street on Beach Boulevard floods a bit. Is that okay? And when that flooding occurs, is access to Beach Boulevard cut off?
That is not the main reason why Beach Boulevard is closed. We mainly close it due to the safety of the travelers or other people who, wave watching. So we want to just make it for residents only.
And as a resident, if I wanted to either get out of my house or get to my house when there's flooding going on Beach Boulevard due to overtopping, if that flooding is going on, is it reasonable that I can get my car to or from my house, or would that be?
Yes, basically the flooding will occur just on the street, and mainly the water will flood if the storm drain system on the street is clogged up. But however, the curb is only 6 inches tall, and basically that's where the water will be ponding. If it goes over that, it'll just go over the seawall.
Thank you. And so the first time I looked at the property, it was in the evening, and one of the thing about the property that immediately caught my attention was that fence, and I use the term loosely, but it's a fence on the south side of the property that is in between that property and that alleyway that runs between, I think it's 1581 Beach Boulevard and 1 Paloma. So as I was thinking in terms of travel arrangements one could make to and from their property, I don't think yet that avenue's been incorporated, and I'm wondering if it could be incorporated if there was an idea that there could be a secondary way off the property. Is it possible to arrange that with the other property owner? Is that an avenue that conceivably could be taken?
Sure. This is Senior Planner Christian Murdoch. That precise issue was raised by staff with the project applicant early on in the project review process. We actually were suggesting that could or maybe even should serve as the primary access to the site. That way we could improve and make the front of Beach Boulevard more pedestrian friendly and more integrated with the promenade that's already there. The applicant has expressed to city staff that he was not able to reach agreement with the property owners along that alley, if you will, or the driveway, accessing the two buildings to the south of the project site. And as a result of not being able to reach agreement to obtain an easement for access or some other arrangement, that alternative was not feasible from a legal standpoint for the applicant to proceed, and we found no basis to require that or to otherwise exert government control to make that happen for the project.
Thank you very much. And my last question, which has nothing to do with flooding. So I was looking at it and I was trying to conceptualize the building. The 2A unit that would be in the northeastmost corner, the third-story balcony, it occurred to me maybe could be a privacy issue for the property directly to the northeast. I'm still learning how conditions work and whatnot, so I'm wondering if we were to pass this tonight, could there be some sort of condition where somehow the privacy from that third floor vantage point in the northeast 2A unit could be mitigated for the sake of the person's privacy and the property behind?
There are actually 2 units which are numbered 2A. So
It's the one to the
just
far
like
north,
the
the far north one.
And Commissioner Bigstick, your concern is regarding privacy of which property?
Don't know the house number. It's directly to the northeast of the property, though. It's right over the fence. It's the one that has the 2 stories with the balcony.
I mean, as a general matter, oftentimes those kinds of modifications can be made, but there can be conflicts with the interior floor plans or structural designs that it's difficult to do that on the fly. Perhaps if you care to ask the applicant during the question period for his team, they may be able to address that point for you.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Bergman?
A few questions to add. So it was mentioned in the staff report that the previous owner of the site was unable to develop. They kept requesting extensions. I'm wondering if we're able to know why they couldn't develop on the site? Is it publicly known?
So I think that there's probably many reasons that are not publicly known. But the plan check process was taking quite a while. They were slow to respond, and I think perhaps they were having some funding difficulties. And so it just kind of went on long enough where we did not think that another continuance was appropriate for various reasons, including that the city had, since that project was approved, had adopted inclusionary housing requirements with which that project would have been subject to. There was new C3 clean water requirements that were required, as well as things had changed in terms of some of the hazard considerations. And so not to say that we were saying it was undevelopable, we were just saying that it would be appropriate to study that further, and it shouldn't be continued.
I see. Thank you.
Or extended.
In regards to the retaining wall, so there is mention in the report that the life of the retaining wall is 40 years. Is there a maintenance agreement set up with the developer or property owner to assist with the maintenance of that wall in the future? given that if a property owner at the site is going to purchase a unit with a 30-year mortgage, but they may want to resell, but the wall's life is diminishing, the value of the property might reduce?
There is no agreement. The wall is in city right away, and the city is, tasked of maintaining it.
Is it, I guess it's kind of convenient that we have the CIP on today's agenda, but is that anticipated to be on one of the capital improvement projects?
There is a current capital improvement projects. It was in the disaster funds. So the city has applied for grants to do initial studies and for replacing the wall and making it more robust.
Okay. The parking at the site, so I know each of the units has a two-car garage, and then there's 2 guest spots, one of which is ADA. I don't believe there's parking allowed on Beach Boulevard. I know with the new curb and sidewalk fronting the development, is street parking proposed for that area? Just wondering for guests.
Streets parking is not a requirement, so we would not allow the street parking. We would have the travel way at the minimum 26-foot width or a 13-foot travel lanes on each direction, and that's it, and the sidewalk, and so it'll be red curb and just become a fire lane.
Right, but I understand that the access on the private property will be fire lane, but the access parallel with the Beach Boulevard, is parking allowed there? Will it be allowed there?
No, it will not
No?
be.
Okay. So then guests of the property owners, they're anticipated to park street parking in the neighborhood and just walk?
If the 2 spots are taken, yes, yeah. The only other alternative would be street parking on Paloma or the adjacent streets.
Okay. Those are all my questions for now.
Okay, and we have questions from Commissioner Niblin.
Thank you. It was actually prompted by something someone else said, and I didn't get a chance to look it up. This project doesn't have an affordability requirement or an affordability component to it. Is it because of the number of units that are involved?
That's correct. The city's below market rate inclusionary zoning ordinance kicks in at 8 or more units.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have one more question. During the inspection of the straps and the bolts and all that stuff, were the bolts actually tested in terms of, we have some very nice pictures of some very corroded surfaces, although the measurements on the straps seem to be holding. I don't know, did anybody try to undo any of those bolts? Just to see if they were...
We have with us David Schreier from Cotton Shires and Associates.
Okay.
No, the bolts weren't tested, just observed.
Okay, so they were observed. Okay, the reason for my question is because I'm in construction and have had to loosen foundation bolts and so on and so forth that are in that area. It has been my experience that although the bolts look perfectly fine, they tend to fail along the threads inside between the washers, and in this case the straps, and the actual nut. And when you go to take the nut off, you wind up with a pencil point on your bolt, which leads me to be concerned that they weren't tested, because they're the linchpin, and the way they appear to be put in is if they snap off, they just drop out. So it's not like there's something on the top that's still going to hold.
It's interesting, the manufacturer's specification indicates the installation should be as you described it, so that the flathead is underneath and the nut is on top, but it appears from the observations that our engineer made in the photos that they were installed reverse, and so the flathead was dropped in and the nut is below. But in answer to your question, no, the bolts weren't tested. They didn't try to unscrew them, and I don't believe the straps were stress tested either.
Thank you very much for that. Any other questions for staff about the retaining wall there? I'm not seeing any, so I'm going to invite the applicant to come up, and you will have 10 minutes, and we may drag you back for more questioning.
Oh, okay. Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you very much for your time this evening. My name is Sivash Mozami. I'll try to keep it to 10 minutes. I might speak rather quickly so I make sure I get through all the content that I was planning on presenting tonight. Over the past 5 years, I lived in Pacifica. I've been involved in the development of 2 projects, 4 townhomes on Santa Rosa, which I entitled and sold to Ryder Homes. Ended up selling the homes to home buyers. You got a few letters of support from those home buyers. And I later developed the 5 townhomes across the street, Pacifica Walk, which is where I reside today. I wanted to thank staff for a very thorough review of the project and concur and fully support staff's presentation. Joining me this evening is my architect, Scott Prickett, civil engineer, Mike O'Connell, structural engineer, Peter Yu, geotechnical engineer, Dan Dykeman, and land use and coastal attorney, David Goldberg. Should commissioners or staff have any technical or land use related questions, 2 of the engineers were actually at the test pit exploration sessions, as was I, as was John Hanson, the owner of the property, so we can dig deeper if need be. For those of you familiar with the site or unfamiliar with the site, we're located at the end of Beach Boulevard. There's a 71-unit apartment complex known as Sea Point. You can see to the east of us a combination of multifamily and single-family homes to our south and single-family homes to the north. This is a good explanation or maybe a picture defining the area. You can see there's a combination of 1 to 3-story structures up Paloma. I've read all the neighborhood kind of comment letters and actually back here. Wanted to provide this slide because I thought it's a good representation of how few units we're actually proposing. Our 4 immediate neighbors to the south consist of 12 units and less land area than our lot. They're actually 18,000 square feet. We're 19,300 square feet. The general plan allows for 16 to 22 dwelling units to the acre. So if you take the, how do I point, Christian? If you take these parcels right here, they're at a density of 24 units to the acre. We're at 16. If you look at the Sea Point apartments, they're at 40 units to the acre. So while we've heard we're proposing a lot of units, we're actually not. We're on the minimum number of units allowed under the general plan. I guess following the previously approved project, I believe our project is a big enhancement. Not only are we proposing fewer units, we've eliminated the underground garage. We are zoning and height compliant. The massing and scale of the buildings allow for our neighbors to the north to have a better view opportunity than they previously had. We've got a road on the north side of our property providing a 30-foot setback. Our project obviously is asking for a variance because of the Appendix D requirement of the fire code for a fire truck to be able to safely pull into the site and turn around. So the variance also provides a greater setback for a building to the front. I guess benefits of this project: proposing housing on an infill lot helps the city meet its housing goals, which we all know about. The additional density drives foot traffic to Palmetto, supporting local businesses. If we want to fulfill our vision of turning Palmetto into a walkable main street, we need residents living nearby. The previous projects I was involved with on Montecito and Santa Rosa are now home to families with children. There are 11 children living in 4 condominiums. Young families support our schools. We've seen a decline in enrollment. New homes prove to improve value of adjacent properties, so while some people think we might be degrading the property values, we're actually improving the values of the neighborhood. We're improving the tax base for the city, generating revenue. The project is, we've been mindful and we've safely cited the project. Staff required a thorough and comprehensive analysis to ensure the development would be safe, consistent with the general plan and the local coastal plan policies. The hazard analysis was prepared by Geosoils, as Ranu had mentioned, who's has decades of coastal engineering experience in the state and also through Pacifica. The city and the outside consultant Cotton Shires, who's here tonight, peer-reviewed the reports. We covered sea level rise, we covered wave overtopping, we covered tsunami inundation, and we also discussed the durability of the shore protection. Excuse me for a second. Furthermore, I guess as part of the update to the city's local coastal plan, ESA also has done studies, and I'm sure everyone here has read the vulnerability assessment, which discusses West Sharp Park and accounts for various degrees of sea level rise. Based on all the analysis, we think the setback is a safe distance from our shore protection, approximately 68 feet, which is more than enough to be safe from wave overtopping, even with the conservative sea level rise estimates. With respect to tsunami inundation, staff recommended, and we have agreed to a condition of approval, stating that we will design our front building with tsunami resilient structural components. This is not only a safety measure for our residents, but also to the neighbors to the east of us. Again, everyone kind of relies on the shore protection. It protects Beach Boulevard. It protects infrastructure. It protects, neighbors to the east. So it's not just about us. The shore protection that we kind of already discussed is a stone revetment backed by a reinforced vertical wall. We can talk about the differences in the shore protection fronting our site than the shore protection further south of us, which has had failures in the past, but I don't want to use my 10 minutes. We can address that later. The protection was subject to several inspections, including test pit excavations, where he talked about by our professionally licensed consultants, peer-reviewed by Cotton Shires, peer-reviewed by Daedalus structural engineers. When we were actually on site, Daedalus said that they define the life of shore protection based on the design life from the day it was installed, that only the upper strap showed sign of loss of life and the bottom 2 straps were perfectly intact. And what they said was they've got to basically say if it's got a design life of 100 years and it's been there 40, it's going to last another 60 years, which is how they came up with their 40-year life, remaining life of the wall. But in reality, I remember him saying that it could be there for another 50 to 100 years if it was monitored. Just wanted to, I guess, reiterate that the shore protection is there not only for the benefit of our project, but the city infrastructure, the street, and everyone to the east of us. Everyone's seen this tsunami inundation map. It's basically the USGC Sapphire model. It's the standard of practice design tsunami model. There's also the Cal OES model, which is for evacuation. So you can see that we are safe from tsunami inundation. Moffitt and Nickel basically address tsunamis, right? This property that we're sitting at today, and they basically said that with a very rare event tsunami that you'd have 6 feet or 6 inches of inundation here. And our site is elevation 28, 3 feet higher than where we're sitting today. And the way we engineered the site, we're cutting the back, filling the front. Our finished floor elevation will be 32. So, we feel like we've addressed that constraint as well. I'll try to finish up quickly. I'm sorry, I have an architect here who's wanted to take you through the floor plans as well, but this is a map that ESA put out for your local coastal plan update. If you look at the map and you look at where we are today, you don't see our site being impacted by wave run-up, and that's with 5.7 feet of sea level rise. The Cosmos GS coastal storm modeling also confirms this exact same thing. If I go back, you see, sorry, do you need me to stop?
If you can wrap it up.
I'll wrap it up in 1 minute. Sorry.
Okay, I'll give you an extra minute to wrap it up.
Yeah, so if you look at this map and you see what happens with the wave run-up, with 5.7 feet of sea level rise, it touches the front of our site. So we feel the site is safe from wave run-up, overtopping, tsunami, and again, the shore protection is the city's property. Commissioner Berman, we would, be happy to go out there and monitor the site, but really, that's a public works project, I think. Community outreach, I personally reached out to all the adjacent property owners. Christian was accurate in his statement that we try to get access via the alleyway. I couldn't reach agreement with any of the adjacent property owners, so we have to rely on Beach Boulevard as a primary access point. We would have loved to turn Beach Boulevard into landscaping and a promenade, but it takes two to tango, they say, right? I can't do it without a willing and property owners adjacent to us. And lastly, I just wanted to comment and say that the previous developer did have financial issues. They were in touch with me from 2016 through 17 trying to sell us the site, and we didn't want to build the old entitled project, the 9-unit, 3-story project that actually took up more of the site. So that entitlement expired, they sold it to us, and here we are today. I'm sorry I went over, and I didn't give my architect a chance to speak, but he's here.
We'll probably call him up for some questions later.
All right, sir.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Big Stick.
Sure, I wanted to follow up with the question I had asked earlier about the A2 unit to the northeast. And as I was saying, as I was envisioning what it would look like, I figure that property to the northeast on Shoreview is right there. And I figured a 3rd-story balcony or any window could probably easily peer into that backyard. So my question to you is just, are there any mitigation measures you can put into play there, or is that?
So by northeast, you mean up here, right? The resident that lives off of Shoreview?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Northeast would be right here.
Correct.
Yeah. So, with the design of the site, the previous project didn't have the street here and wasn't set back. So we feel like, we've somewhat addressed privacy. Is that your concern?
So the balcony would be on the east.
You mean
coming
this
out the east,
balcony?
right? Huh?
This balcony or this balcony in the front?
Would there be a balcony off the 3rd
Oh, okay.
story on the east? I'm looking at the east side specifically.
Yeah, so there is a balcony there.
Okay.
And I guess that's a question for our architect, but I think we could probably do something with that balcony, potentially.
Sure. That was the one place in the entire property where I was genuinely concerned about the privacy of the neighbors, because I figured any windows right there, any balconies right there, that's a very easy gaze into the backyard, and I figure
Right.
if I were living there, maybe I don't want people being able to look into my backyard quite that easily.
Right. We can take that into consideration. I'd have to talk to our architect and John Hanson, the property owner.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions for the applicant? Not seeing any, I'm going to ask some.
Sure.
And I'm actually going to ask this of, I believe it's the Cottonshire gentleman that's here. In terms of the inspections of the seawall, the company that was hired to actually do that, they wrote a limitations paragraph. And the report is based on a limited review of the existing site and was prepared solely for Cottonshire. No third parties, the actual structural characteristics of the existing wave wall could not be fully assessed since no calculations were performed. In addition, site terrain and armor protections, concealed structural engineering, and hidden structural quality conditions could alter the structural characteristics of the existing site from what is inferred in the report. Is that an accurate statement of looking at the wall, that there were several things that could not be assessed, and I'm getting at this 40 years. I'm having a hard time thinking that 40 years is an accurate number when the other failures have not been from the straps failing, but from the actual impact of waves against these tiles. And a lot of that couldn't be inspected.
Right, so the structural engineering firm that we hired, the inspection was focused on what was observed in the 4 test pits that were excavated, and I believe the 40-year estimate was based on the width and the thickness of the straps as originally installed versus what was remaining after corrosion was observed and measured. And so there was an extrapolation on the rate of corrosion since construction in 1984 to date, and what had occurred, and extrapolated that under similar conditions, what would be left.
Okay, so, but it was almost entirely focused on the straps and not on the tiles themselves.
That is correct.
Okay, so this is, the 40 years is based on what's expected for the straps to still have some function, but it does not touch at all on whether the wall can be breached.
That is correct.
Thank you.
You are accurate.
Chair Clifford, could you please state for the record what page of the agenda package you were reading from?
I was reading from
Thank you.
agenda package, page 135. Okay. Thank you. We have no more questions for you.
Are
at
we,
this-
I guess, allowed to address that question?
We just had an engineer
Okay.
address it.
Okay. I'm just wondering, because we have 2 engineers that were also there
There'll be
during
an
the observations.
opportunity for
Okay.
rebuttal
Okay.
after public comment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and now I'm going to open the public comment portion of this hearing, And my first card is for Shariel Henley. If you would come up and speak. You have 3 minutes. Please try to keep it within that amount of time.
I'll do my best. Thank you very much. First off, I'm Cheryl Henley. I live at 15 Paloma Avenue. I'm adjacent to the property. And I want to state that this location is dangerous. My neighbors and I are appalled that this site's even under consideration. Climate change and sea level rise are real threats to this area. None of these threats can be mitigated by producing a myriad of engineering reports and a thumbs up from the city, none of which consider climate change and sea level rise in their analysis. In 2008, Executive Order Policy states to begin considering sea level rise in reviewing development projects. San Mateo County issued a sea level rise vulnerability assessment in 2017. Pacifica's sea level rise adaptation plan from 2018 all say this is a serious issue. Instead, the city, in order to get this pushed through, relies on the city's 1980 LCP. The city knows this is a serious threat, yet decides to turn a blind eye in this case, and I'm wondering why. The Coastal Commission review of this project cites many concerns that the city wholesale dismisses and calls misguided. The Coastal Commission is not misguided. The Coastal Commission understands future threats from sea level rise and therefore recommends that analysis should be performed to take this into consideration. None of the reports for this site factor in sea level rise. One primary concern of the Coastal Commission is that there is a singular point of access to the site. Our neighbors and I know that this stretch of roads is extremely treacherous during certain times of the year. The reality is things are only going to get worse due to our changing climate. To turn a blind eye to the potential threats and disregard the safety of future residents is criminal in my mind. The real-life possible problems of developing in this high-risk location include a retaining wall breach or sinkhole that may make the road impassable, dangerous wave run-up and overtopping, and has already injured residents, impacted their property, weather and ocean conditions that make it dangerous for residents to reach their home and may even prevent emergency vehicles from reaching the site and even strand people from getting to and from their property. Almost done. This project is not of appropriate scale or character for our neighborhood. This project is bringing 7 luxury townhomes with up to 5 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms to our neighborhood of small bungalow-type homes and small apartments. This does not meet our stated goal of our city to provide affordable housing and maintain the character of our neighborhood. I know I'm wrapping it up, and I've put my thoughts in a letter to you, and I hope you get a chance to read it or have read it already. And I'm actually urging that you delay a vote to do further evaluation of ignored long-term risks associated with this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, my next speaker is Sue Elderidge, I think. Well, it's my ability to pronounce the names correctly, and I apologize to anybody who I mangle. Please proceed, Sue.
Good evening, Honorable Planning Commissioners. I'm speaking on behalf of Nancy Merchant. As she mentioned in her earlier letter, my biggest concern about this project is impact to public safety. The staff report did not provide the information requested by the Coastal Commission's letter, nor does it mention the frequency of road closures on Beach Boulevard in the winter due to flooding and overtopping. This would be the largest development ever built along the north section of Beach Boulevard with only one way in and out, which is unreliable. According to the Army Corps of Engineers study of the seawall in 2017, there's a history of failure, and the seawall is listed as being in a state of progressive failure. It is completely unsafe for new residents in these luxury townhouses. I hope they don't have a medical emergency, such as a heart attack or the onset of childbirth, as the road closure also endangers emergency responders. Hazard 45 of the LCP was completely ignored. The site is not safe for wave runoff, flooding, and other coastal hazards, even now, let alone 40 to 100 years. The frequent road closures impact traffic and parking, as well as creating a hazard for emergency vehicles. since Paloma is a congested one-way street with little opportunity to turn vehicles around. Fire trucks routinely use Paloma as an access point to the neighborhood. During repairs to the collapsed section of the seawall, I witnessed a fire truck and ambulance under siren go west on Paloma, turn south on Beach Boulevard, and then realized they could not get through. So they had to turn around or return to Palmetto before making their way back to Beach Boulevard, south of the obstruction, wasting precious minutes. Has any thought been given to access for the excavators to perform maintenance required by the CDPs for both the Shoreview and Beach Boulevard revetments? And I'm almost done. The history of voids also along the promenade suggests there might be impacts to the seawall infrastructure underneath Beach Boulevard or adjacent homes. I thought the planning department was supposed to perform due diligence to ensure safe projects. This staff report seems to bend over backwards to ignore the task. Respectfully, what was the point of the sea level rise adaptation plan and the updated LCB, if the knowledge isn't being used to guide your decisions? Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. My next speaker is Lauren. I believe it's Black, but it could be Block.
My name is Lauren Black, and I live at 252 Shoreview Avenue. This is the property that you were referring to, sir, with the second unit.
Thank you.
I have multiple concerns regarding this project, but in order to keep my comments to 3 minutes, I would like to focus on just a couple of main issues. One of my biggest concerns is the movement of soil from the back of this lot to the front of the lot. I'm very concerned that excavating sand and moving it from the back of the lot to the front could potentially affect the stability of my lot. It is all sand and can very easily move and shift, and who knows what issues with stability, drainage, and potential liquefaction might occur in the event of an earthquake. This is a big concern, and I would like to know how these issues will be addressed and potentially mitigated. As others have stated, I urge the Planning Commission to seriously consider the impact of sea level rise now and in the future. The city will be responsible for addressing any breaches with the current seawall, which as we recall took the city over a year to fully repair that break and sinkhole near the Chit Chat on Beach Boulevard. I watch the waves break over this wall almost every day during the winter and frequently other times during the year. These big waves are dangerous and will most likely close the only driving access to these new condos. This is going to cause severe problems for the new condo residents and existing homeowners in the surrounding area. Parking on Paloma and the surrounding streets is going to be untenable. Next, I would like to address an item called building location on package, page 44, item B. This item states, buildings should be sited to consider shadows, changing climatic conditions, and the potential for passive or active solar energy, safety, and privacy of adjacent outdoor spaces. Building placement should take into account potential impacts of adjacent property. Existing view, privacy, and solar access of surrounding properties should be preserved whenever possible. I would like to submit that these new condos do not take these things into consideration as they relate to my property and the property of my neighbors. These luxury condos will block all the light coming into our home from the south. It will block my ocean view and the mountain views from my backyard and deck and severely impact my privacy. These factors, along with soil concerns, will negatively affect my and my neighbors' property value. These buildings are not to scale for this neighborhood and are not typical of any other buildings along Beach Boulevard and do not fit with the look and feel of our neighborhood. My partner and I have lived in this house for 7 years, and we're raising 2 boys here, and while we love Pacifica and our neighborhood, this development, as is, will dramatically change the experience of living in our home. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. My next speaker is Stephen Clark. Stephen Clark, there you are.
Thank you. I'm Steve Clark. I'm the owner of the home at 7 Paloma, which is also adjacent to the proposed development. So I was here 2 years ago, and I spoke out in opposition to the previously proposed condo development at the site. At that time, the commission wisely denied the extension of the permits for the project, determining that the project could be detrimental to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood and city. So what I ask is, what's changed? In my opinion, very little. Okay, there's no underground parking, but I mean, I think almost everybody except the previous property owner thought that was a bad idea to begin with. So there's 2 fewer units, 7 instead of 9, so now they don't have to provide any affordable housing. Otherwise, it's pretty similar. 2 buildings covering about the same footprint, 2 and 3 stories respectively. In denying the prior development, the commission cited changed circumstances, sea level rise, wave overtopping, and seawall damage in 2016. These concerns are very real, and they're even more critical today. So the big issue before us is public safety. And by the way, I agree with Cheryl and Sue and Lauren, my neighbors. We're very concerned about this. I believe that the planning staff has seriously underestimated the potential impacts of sea level rise, wave overtopping, and the condition of the seawall. The California Coastal Commission comments on these issues have been largely ignored. They note this increased likelihood of wave overtopping and site flooding. As a resident, I've witnessed this. I hear the waves crashing. Sometimes they're really loud. My neighbor at 1 Paloma was actually pinned up against her building in January 2017. And she was on the local news. And the decks from both 1 Paloma and 1581 Beach Boulevard were destroyed by waves in that same month. So that's a real concern. My primary concern is that the access is so restricted. You know, and the CCC wisely recommended that the current applicant be required to provide alternative access to the site. He's tried to do that, but it's not possible. And frankly, I didn't want a driveway going along the side of my house, and neither did my neighbors. So what's going to happen when Beach Boulevard is closed and people need to get in and out? Other people have mentioned that. I don't need to go into detail. And I also think the traffic issues are being downplayed. Now, I don't know what 4 a.m. and 4 p.m. peak hour trips mean, but the CEQA said in their report that there'll be 41 daily trips in all. So I think that traffic and parking is going to be a nightmare. So I've lived here 5 years. I love my neighborhood. I'm not opposed to all development, just inappropriate development. We do need more housing, and certainly we need affordable housing, but do we really need 7 luxury condos on a site with severely restricted access, major environmental concerns, and questions about the
Would you
seawall's
please wrap
condition?
it up?
I will. I'm almost done. Thank you.
Thank you.
And, you know, I just think, in short, the site is very risky. And I ask the question, is this development right for all Pacificans? I don't think so, and I thank you for your time.
Okay, my next speaker is Jonathan. And if Jonathan, when he comes to the mic, would please state your full name for the record, I'd appreciate it.
So, Jonathan Mizrahi. I live up Monterey, and I think something that's unique about this project is we need to bring in more development here because as being a property owner, our taxes are going towards new city services or sometimes the lack of city services. Parks are finally getting upgraded slowly one by one, but as some of us that have families, we'd like them to be not broken, not all this stuff, and it seems like the city is lacking in some of the money, finances to take care of it with 7 new property-paying taxers. It would just boost that funding, and though it's a small amount, we are supposed to be getting up to 413, and it's moving forward towards that direction, and I feel like, seems like we're kind of dragging our feet with the rest of the state and the state mandating it on us, and so just think it's time that we start moving forward, being proactive instead of reactive, and actually trying to get new development going on so that we don't have problems like some of the other cities in our state with the states. Yeah, that's kind of it. So, thanks.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. My next speaker is Jeff Dam.
Name is Jeff Dahm, actually. It's German pronunciation. Either way,
well.
not a big deal. I've lived it with all my life. Everybody related to Hoover or the Beavers.
I guess I didn't see two M's there.
Anyhow, I'm standing up for my fellow existing tax-paying property owners. They have a lot of value in their homes. We love their properties. We love our privacy. This megastructure is going to have a major environmental impact on a lot of these people. Enough to make you cry. I'm not going to cry. Anyhow, so I don't mind one or two. I don't mind a custom townhome. I don't mind maybe 3 for the size of the lot. Standard setback, standard residential. Megastructure. No, no, no. The tax basis isn't going to be worth the extra housing. We love our houses. If you look at the deal, you got 7 cars. We got 7 furnaces. We got 7 washer dryers. We got 7 barbecues, all packed into a big old mega structure. Big one, like this, blocking the wind. There's these little houses here. Here's the ocean. The wind comes by, boom. Now we got prevailing wind current problems directly affecting these neighbors. They're going to be on their deck smelling somebody's baby laundry running with a Stay Puft dryer vents, 7 of them, while they had nothing. They maybe 1 or 2, maybe the other neighbors have 1 or 2 Stay Puft dryer vents going. Maybe a barbecue, but not 7. In addition, with the big structure, with the wind, it's going to change the venting in the existing homes. Whereas as the wind comes over the top, you've now got a rotor. It's going to cause a vacuum. Poor Steve's fireplace is going to run backwards. Not that he's using it, but he's going to smell something coming in like a dryer vent going into his window. So nothing's going to vent properly with a giant structure. It's going to, depending on the prevailing wind direction, have a problem with that. Pets and visitors, there's no means for pets. They got 1 planter box, they got no grass, they got no place for a pet to go run outside real quick. Parking for the people, again, not available. So, a large building, a lot of shade. We got mold and mildew problems, ventilation problems. I like Sia, I like his projects, they're great. Too big, too much. Too many people, no parking. I relinquished 4 parking places in front of my house for all you fellow dog walkers and some of the neighbors that need to park. I could put all my vehicles out there and take up all that property parking. I don't. I have a triple lot. I love my view, used to, before somebody did the same thing here. And so it's basically the fundamental quality of life that we have to appreciate for these tax-paying individuals that have been here for over 25 years. And if they say, if they build it, they will come, we don't want them to come. We don't want them to build it. I don't mind a custom home. I don't mind a beautiful home. Maybe 2. That's it.
Thank you very much. Kiefer Katz.
Hello, my name is Kiefer Katz. My wife and I live at 1581 Beach. We're actually renters. I am here because I'm really opposed to this project. I think it's really bad for Sharp Park specifically and Pacifica as a whole. We moved here about 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, 1 year and 8 months, so I'm not overstating it. But we moved here because Pacifica it doesn't feel like other Bay Area towns. It feels welcoming, it still feels inclusive, it still feels like it's like a real place. Palo Alto isn't a real place anymore. This is like, it feels like somewhere that people really live. And you can see that in the current from 1980 local coastal plan, which says that West Sharp Park was the primary location of low and moderate income households in the city, which is crazy. Like I grew up in Southern California where like this would be Malibu in LA. It's crazy that this was ever a place where just anybody could live next to the ocean. And this project would kind of directly undermine that. The current local coastal plan, as stated, states its objective as to protect the existing availability of low-income housing in the coastal zone. I don't have a comprehensive overview of real estate prices and development in Sharp Park, although I promise I look for it. But I know rents have gone up since 1980 in a city that doesn't have rent control. I know that home prices are well out of reach for anyone making a median income. And I also know that after this project, Sia's other project, and the other pending project along Beach are approved, 22 luxury condos will have been approved and then built in Sharp Park since 2013. And in that time, even with a housing crisis in the Bay Area, no units affordable to even moderate income levels have been added to Sharp Park. I think that the 1578 lot is a really great opportunity to change that. It could accommodate more than 7 units. I think, especially in this neighborhood where you have really great access to transit, the 112 and the 118 running you straight to BART, it would be a really great place to provide housing for renters, for people who don't need to use up all the parking spaces, who don't need to add to traffic, who just want to head into the city, do their jobs, and come home. Instead, they've opted for luxury condos that assuming they're priced at all comparatively to the ones that aren't actually on the beach, will be $2 million or more. And they're building 7, coincidentally, which is just under the amount that would require anything inclusionary. I don't think that's a coincidence. I don't think that that's out of their desire to keep things small. I want them to build on the lot. I admit that there's safety issues, but I would like there to be housing there. I would like to have more neighbors. I would like to be able to go meet people who aren't just like me, who I don't know. But I don't think that this project will do that. I think it will just make Pacifica a little bit more like everything else that isn't so great about this whole region these days. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My next speaker is Tiffany Zamet? Is that a Z? I'm not sure. Tiffany.
Hi there, good evening, thank you. My name is Tiffany Zamet. I've lived in Pacifica for the last 34 years, the entirety of my life. I'm happy to be here this evening to just make a few notes about the project. I do appreciate the fact that the project does have new setbacks, as well as fire access, which I know wasn't addressed with the project prior. The most recent construction in this area has also created a resurgence. As an educator, we're not a basic aid school district here in Pacifica. We rely solely on our FTES to keep our teachers funded. And so, with respect to children and growing families in this area, it's also going to support that growth and our children being able to take part in a system that doesn't have a teacher shortage and the continuing cuts that have to be made in these districts that are not basic aid. And then I'd also just like to speak to YIMBYism for a second. So yes, in my backyard, I do live across the street in the Montecito townhomes. And I welcome the growth and the new folks that would come to this town get to enjoy everything that I've enjoyed for the last 34 years in Pacifica. I know we're also slated to look at a hotel across the street. I live across the street. I welcome it blocking my views. We are in the next generation, and I'd like to see others get to also enjoy everything that we have enjoyed here, or I have enjoyed in Pacifica for the entirety of my life. And I think that this project is taking into consideration some of these other components and setting back and the safety issues. And again, it's going to support our community at large and supporting our small businesses. As I know, I have lots of friends that own breakers and other things in this town, and the only thing that supports those businesses are people living here to support them. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My next speaker is Joel Silver.
Hello, thank you. My name is Joel Silver. I live across the street on Montecito, and this is my first planning commission, actually my first city council meeting ever. And the reason I'm here is because I really love this town, and I do care about this project. I'm not for development in general, and I've seen negative attributes associated with my hometown of Santa Cruz, but this project in particular, and the one on Palmetto, I do think are carefully planned out and do bring benefits, in particular address the housing crisis. I work nearby at a company, and I try to recruit people, young families, to come to Pacifica, and there's no housing that they can find. Maybe there is somewhere, but they're reporting back to me that they can't find any appropriate housing. So I think these do fill a need. I also think they will improve a lot of the Beach Boulevard traffic and pedestrian in particular. And in general, I think this is an excellent opportunity for the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Beth Lemke.
Hello, my name is Beth Lemke, and I am a business owner in town and also a 13-year resident of Pacifica. The property I own is on Santa Maria, so I'm in between both projects, and I'm here tonight to support both of the projects. I've known Sia for about a year now, and I'm familiar with the projects that he has worked on, and I think that they're very well done. And I suppose I've heard the term luxury a few times tonight, and if that is the same thing as saying that they're attractive and well-built and will probably bring, some nice and very needed funds to the city through property taxes, then absolutely, it's part of the diversity of our city. One of the things that I've found really interesting in living here and then interacting with people through my business is that it's sort of a huge catch-22 with regard to people want the services in town, they want all the benefits of living in, say, a big city, but they want to maintain their charming small town. And I understand that, but it has to be funded, and this is not a huge development. It does look to me like they've jumped through all the hoops and that they've been very open to making changes and whatnot. And let's see, I actually wrote down notes so I wouldn't lose track. Just again, we very much need city funds in terms of like maintaining the seawall and all that. To what extent that has to be paid for by the city itself? Well, how does it get paid? Through property taxes and whatnot. So anyway, I could go on, and I won't. I just want to say that I support it. I think there's room for all sorts of development. Of course, we do need affordable housing too, but this is just one piece in a very large puzzle. So thank you.
Thank you. My next speaker is Nick Langhoff. Did I get that right?
Well, good evening, and thank you for having me here for a moment. My name is Nick Langhoff. I grew up in Pacifica and have been here for nearly 38 years. I own 1581 Beach Boulevard, a 4-unit building directly south of the proposed project. I inherited it from my father a few years ago. Kiefer and Bailey live there now. Kiefer just spoke. And I have a number of concerns with the project that a number of my neighbors have brought up as well this evening, and I'm going to focus on a few of them. I was here 2 years ago to speak about the proposed development under the last owner, and some of the same concerns I voiced then and the Planning Commission at that time had are the same ones I have today. So rather than hit a number of the points that a number of my neighbors have, I'm going to focus on one of my largest concerns is the singular access through Beach Boulevard. That's come up here, and the Planning Commission have asked a number of really good questions that I was happy to hear earlier in the discussion. But I am so far found the answers from engineering not very satisfactory. I find the engineering, frankly, kind of unthorough and arriving at estimations that are hard to make with any level of confidence. I'm the chair of the Engineering and Computer Science Department at Skyline College. Have advanced degrees in engineering, and in my professional opinion, I don't find the engineering very thorough at all, and have some concerns about it. The singular access through Beach Boulevard, whether it be from the tie-in straps failing that have not been assessed very, very clearly. I mean, visual inspection is really not a very thorough analysis, or be it from wave up that we know is going to happen coming through with strong power. My neighbor Steve Clark mentioned that my decks and fence were demolished 2 years ago by a wave that came up in 2017. And sent property down the alleyway and destroyed a bunch of stuff, almost sent a board through the window at the front of my property that this property is also in line with, or the proposed property is in line with. So I see no reason to believe that the seawall isn't going to wash out. If that's a singular access point for safety and the civilians, the people who live in that property, that's a major concern. Speaking of king tides and wave over, the proposed property is putting in a revetment wall that I fear might actually divert water onto my property. And again, speaking of wave over and heavy rainfall runoff into my property, the infill of the proposed development, though not very well detailed in the plans, puts the proposed property at an elevated level above my property, like the level, and I'm seriously concerned about the water running off into that area, affecting people who live there and making for larger concerns. So, in summary, I don't think that the property fits in aesthetically or in scope with the neighborhood. A number of my neighbors have expressed concerns for, and so I just don't think that we as people who have a chance to put in an ounce of prevention rather than a pound of cure can take the steps to not put the safety of Pacifica citizens on a bet based on visual inspections and theoretical models that are directly in conflict with the observations we've had over the last decades. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. My next speaker is Dave Zimmer.
Good evening. My name is David Zimmer. I'm new to Pacifica. Moved here last January. Brought my family of 2 from the Central Valley up here for work. I'm now a family of 3. I currently rent across the street at Montesino. You can see his last project. And you know what? I had ruled that out because they looked like luxury townhomes. But at the time, for a family of 4, in Pacifica, where I wanted to live, where I was close to work, that was all that was available. So I took it. And it's been the best thing in the last 18 months. It's a lot of young families. I've got kids in those same units that my kids play with. It's a great sense of community. And my wife and I are just talking now about we want to stay here longer. I've had kind of a short-term outlook at our stay here, and we love it. We love the schools. I love the work here, and I want to stay, but I don't want to rent forever. I want to buy, but there's not a lot here available right now. I look at what C is doing down the street, and I get excited because I see opportunity for me down the road, for other young families like me down the road to have a place to go, to enjoy Pacifica like we have. It looks like the experts have done their portion of the work. I'm not an expert in sea level rise and seawall structure. I'm going to leave it to the experts to tell us it's good. It looks like his plans have his building well above the rest of the properties on beach. That seems like it's safer. They're at least in the same boat as all the other properties on beach, and they're trying to do more to make it better than that. So I just want to say I'm here in support of it. They look like luxury, but they're just really nice. And to bring more people in, more families in, more money in, it's just good for the town. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Aaron Markle? I think that's what I'm reading.
Messias? Messias.
Messiah. I blew it.
It's probably my handwriting. I'm Erin Macias. Good evening, commissioners and staff. I am a Lindemar resident, and I enjoy Beach Boulevard almost as much as my dog. In response to the concerns for the first responders' access, I'm a fire wife of over 20 years. My husband has performed ocean and cliff rescues and has been fighting California wildfires for over 2 decades. I can assure you there is no natural or man-made barrier that will prevent our committed and highly skilled first responders from protecting and serving the public in this area. Living in a coastal zone, we recognize that the oceans have an impact on our environment in ways that are both predictable and unpredictable. I don't think anyone is attempting to negate or undermine climate change and its impact on this area. The engineers and property owner have certainly performed due diligence with regards to this site. And the promenade and the accessibility issues. With regards to the parking, we're seeing a sharp increase in ride sharing and the uncomfortable debut of the driverless cars. I really don't see this as an issue. The need for housing units is not just needed, but the Association of Area Governments has made it clear that we need to do our part. The property owner is a local with a vested interest in his own community. And after watching the presentation, it's apparent that this is a lower density project that is consistent with the sustainability and housing goals, and it does contribute to the tax base. You know, on a personal note, no one likes change in their neighborhood. But we are, as a community, we have to adapt to the need for incremental growth in Pacifica and in our state. I think this project is consistent with the neighborhood. It adds a different level of diversity that is not quite welcome in Pacifica, curiously. We do need to fund our city. We need to fund our schools. We need to support our local businesses. And we also have a lot of in-need residents that we desperately need the income resources to be able to contribute to those services. This would greatly enhance the area and provide much-needed housing units in Pacifica. Please approve as conditioned. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My next speaker is Craig Joyner.
Good evening. I previously submitted a letter that outlined my concerns about this project, covering storms and king tides, the design of the project, the scale of the project, traffic implications, soil stability. I live at 244 Shoreview, which is the property directly north of this proposal. My elevation is about 4 feet higher on the beachfront than this property. Late this evening, I don't know if you've seen them or not, but I sent some photos of January 2017 when a wave came up over our property and my neighbor's property, took out the fence that divided our properties, moved all of their patio furniture, moved a large wooden picnic table, moved it through the fence. The picnic table ended up leaning against my home. His furniture was all shoved against the fence leading out into Shoreview Avenue, and that fence was actually broken also. I'm 68 years old, and I've forgotten calculus, differential equations, and all of the things that people use to come up with theoreticals about sea level and wave topping. But I can tell you from my personal experience that every year we have a wave like that. At least one. It comes up onto the property to the south of me, 1567 Beach. It comes up onto me. It comes up onto my neighbors north. It comes on further past 1567 Beach. I live there and I know that I'm in danger. I would not want to put other people in danger. It doesn't make sense to me that the city of Pacifica would move forward with a building of this size and scope and endanger our own reputation as Pacificans. I have friends who live back in the Midwest that still ask me about, oh, what about those apartments that fell in? Is your house going to fall in? We have that reputation around the country, unfortunately. And if something happens to this project or any other project along here, it just further adds to the diminishment of the pride that we have in Pacifica. In front of that is a retaining wall that's prefab concrete blocks that are locked together. It's a PVC pipe that holds them together with a re-rod down through the middle of it, is my understanding. Those can erode underneath and behind the rock revetment and blow out. Has nothing to do with waves overtopping. It's just the constant force of the waves coming in and out, in and out, in and out consistently against those rocks. I urge you to vote against this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. David Leo? L-E-A-L?
Good evening, commissioners, as well as city staff. My name is David Leal. I am a resident of West Sharp Park. First off, I'd start by saying that I think this is a great project. It will bring much-needed housing, as others have mentioned, to Pacifica, which is much needed, as well as increase our tax base for specifically this property, but also bring in 7 families or 7 households with vested interests in improving West Sharp Park. There's been a lot of talk of luxury housing. I agree with some other folks. This is not luxury housing. This is market rate housing, and this is the Bay Area. So it's unfortunately the prices are what they are right now, but this project is definitely not luxury housing. Although the housing is very nice, and just look at the properties across the street as well as the street behind it. They definitely improve the aesthetics of the neighborhood. I'd also like to say to the commission, as well as my neighbors, residents of Pacifica, that for West Sharp Park neighbors, as well as Fairway Park to a certain extent, having more invested neighbors care about the seawall is good for our entire neighborhood. That seawall keeps the ocean water out of our neighborhood, and having 7 households who pay plus $1 million, I don't know what these are gonna go for, but over $1 million, they're gonna be very invested in the city upkeeping the seawall, which not only protects that property, but it also protects the neighbors, as well as my house. So I want more people invested in the neighborhood who care about that seawall being maintained. I'm one of those residents who want it maintained. And there was some talk of the reports done, and I know 40 years was mentioned, but the other report also said 75 years. So we should look at that range, not keep 40 as the high. 40 is actually the low in terms of life of the seawall. And the comments of was the expectation that it would be maintained, and from what I've seen with the city, the plan is to maintain and upkeep that seawall, the north seawall as well as the south seawall, as well as the berm further south. I do want to mention around the conditions of approval. So like I said, I'm in favor of this project. I think it should move forward and should get built. I would like to see one of the conditions removed. My concern is the one with the relocation of the first floor bedroom. In my opinion, there's no issues with having a bedroom on the first floor of that property. I know we did it on the property across the street over here, but for this project, I don't believe it needs to be added, and if the developer wants to remove it, they can, but it doesn't need to be a condition. Thank you.
Thank you. My next speaker is Brian O'Flynn.
Good evening, commissioners and staff. My name is Brian O'Flynn, and I'm a property owner on Beach Boulevard for over 20 years. Thank you for your service and the task you have in adjudicating projects that come before you for approval, which is happening everywhere across the country in all sorts of municipalities and communities. It's a very common also in the sense of that oftentimes the objections to a project come from those who are immediate neighbors to the project. And it's not, I mean, it's pretty understandable that if you're a neighbor you'd probably prefer there be no development next to you because you've got your views or what have you, but it's important to realize for all of us that we're living in a community and we're not living out in the country, and we have to sort of share. I noticed just in listening to all the comments carefully that probably a majority of the neighbors are fairly recent arrivals to Pacifica, and I would encourage them to welcome new arrivals that could come with this development. Seems like a very well-studied, well-designed project. I noticed that the portion which is along Beach Boulevard, which is what you see, is only 2 stories tall, and they've kept the taller part of the development back off Beach Boulevard, and there's also a 3-story development back at the other end of that block. I think we also have to sort of stay focused on the science and the expert, both in terms of the city staff who studied it, the engineers that they brought out, some who were the top coastal engineers in the state. I'm concerned about the maintenance of the seawall. I did walk down there myself and inspected on 2 occasions when they had excavated out the test pilot holes and saw that the condition of the straps were in fairly good condition, talked to the engineers, and I was very sort of satisfied. One of the engineers also was talking about having a very cost-effective plan for actually supporting the seawall and doing it in a stage thing, which could be very cost-effective, which I'm going to work for and hopefully present to the city. I think it's scale appropriate, and I would encourage you to support what the city staff has recommended, which was approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. My next speaker is Scott, I'm going to say Frazier.
Good evening. I'm Scott Frazier. I'm a 41-year resident of the coastside, and since 2005, we've owned 2017 Palmetto. I initially came to support the second agenda item project, but after listening to the rest of the speakers today, I thought it was important that I offer support of both. To me, on the second project, we need a clear sign that redevelopment and upward progress are going to happen in the area. And I tell you that from the perspective of having to rehabilitate a building where my former tenants were not good stewards of the property, and I need to be able to gauge how far, how quick to go, and how we are going to be able to grow and service the rest of the community. Since we are planning on running a family-operated hospitality business there, I also think it's possible that we are inviting and welcoming to new families to this community, particularly upwardly mobile families who will contribute to the local businesses and contribute to the cost of continuing to improve the community. And finally, I'd like to make clear that we need more growth here. We need a lot more growth. While we are not the rest of the Bay Area, we compete for goods and trades here in the Bay Area, and we need to see the most upward progress possible because we're having to pay the same rates to repair our buildings. We're having to pay the same cost for food, everything down the line. So I'm hoping we can find some balance and bring a little bit more families and more people to the area who can contribute. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. My next and I think final speaker is Robin Reneals.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners, City staff. My name is Robin Reneals, a 43-year resident of this neighborhood. I want to say the first thing is that I met Sia a while ago on various projects, looked at the projects. This is really quality. This is a quality developer. He brings wonderful things to the community. He's supportive to the community along with the quality of the developments that he brings. He provides needed housing. I couldn't afford what it is that he is selling at the market today. I couldn't find anything in the market, but you know, right now, I was just fortunate to get in when I could, and that was I've been here since '76. It's just really beneficial to see projects like this The ones that he does have on Montecito are amazing. And just the fact that it can bring families in, just like a few people have stated, into the neighborhood, and they can be here and benefit from the quality of the schools that we have and from what a wonderful place this is. And it brings in young families, I think, is an amazing thing. I think it's an opportunity we should really embrace. In looking at the project itself, it is vastly an improvement over what was being proposed before. And it does, in fact, incorporate into the front of it on the ocean side a form of its own type of a seawall or a break. It's a protection for that property. A lot of these ones that we've seen go in recently in the last few years along Beach Boulevard are doing this. I think these are really solid, they're solid places. If we do this and build this project, I think it only enhances the protection and the strength of Beach Boulevard and what ultimately we say as a city we're going to do, which is to protect the neighborhood. Along with a seawall that is really built as a seawall. What we have out there, the blocks stuck together, all these different hodgepodge things that we've been putting together over the years, the dirt levee down the road there that's protecting the golf course, all of these things need to change in order to be adequate protection for the neighborhood and maintain what we have here. And this is a quality neighborhood with families here, with schools here, with all of our infrastructure that deserves to be protected. I think putting this project in is additive to the overall project of what we want to do for the neighborhood. It adds to Palmetto's plans for project and the vision that will continue for the development here. And I wholly support Sia in what he's doing here in both of the projects, because we need a good restaurant on Palmetto too. And I think that's what number 2 is going to bring in here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, that was my last speaker card. Is there anybody else who would like to speak to this item? Seeing no one, I am going to close the public portion of this hearing. And now I will bring back the applicant, and he will have 3 minutes to rebut anything he chooses to rebut.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'd like to take this time to actually have Dan Dykeman and Peter Yu and Mike O'Connell, who are 3 of our engineers, and also David Goldberg, provide rebuttal or clarification on some of the points that were brought up. So I think first off, we'll start with Dan, and then Peter, and then go down the line. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thanks for hearing us. I did the geotechnical work for both the buildings as well as looking at the retaining wall that's above the rock riprap along the ocean. One of the things we looked at was not just the concrete itself, but we also looked at the retained materials, which was a very high quality, high granular material that in some cases was so well compacted, even now after 40 years, that we had a hard time driving the pin in to take our density tests. So absent the waves actually hitting the raw dirt itself, this dirt would hold it up itself without a retaining wall. It is in very, very good shape. I'll leave the structural aspects to the structural engineer, but from a geotechnical perspective, this wall's a very strong wall. It's going to hold up quite well for any traffic on top of it and anything behind it.
Hi, my name is Peter Yu. I'm a structural engineer for 25 years. I've done a lot of retaining structures. Our current project, including the seawall project at San Francisco waterfront. So this project, I was there twice when the test pit was open. Our primary focus was look at the structural portion, which is the exposed straps and connection to the wall. It is interesting that pointed out some of the bolts actually are upside down, some are actually the other way around. I did a high-tech testing using screwdriver, poke at it, and they're actually in pretty good shape. I did kind of trying to find out the corrosion effect on the bolts. For all my years of experience, this wall is actually in very good shape. I know some people have concerns of the other invisible, integrity of the wall. You have to do destructive testing, and this wall, as we can see, based on the experience we have, it's really in good shape. That's what we have to say.
Good evening, Commissioners. David Goldberg, Armbruster, Goldsmith, and Delvac. With the remaining time, just like to make a couple points.
One, sea level rise. The staff report analysis as well as the consultant reports did not ignore sea level rise. It was factored into each of the various reports. Number two, staff did not ignore Coastal Commission's comments. The staff report includes responses to those. The three primary comments were sea level rise. That was addressed. Whether a secondary point of access was necessary, staff, you heard from them tonight, stated that that was not necessary. And then finally, with respect to parking, they concluded parking was adequate as it was per code. If I can just make one final point as I see my time is elapsing here, this project is zoned for high density. This property is zoned for high density. The project is consistent with that zoning. We understand some of the neighbors have concerns. They have some anxiety about living in proximity to property that bears that zoning. But the fact is, it's consistent. It's not out of scale. It's within the height limit. It's within the density. The parking is per code. The traffic generated by this project will be consistent with that of other developments of a similar density. Of course, we all want things to stay the same. There is no view protection ordinance in this city. People do not have a right to their views in perpetuity. The project has been sensitively designed.
Can you please
and as I wrap up, we would like to request your approval of this project. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. The 3 minutes is gone. I'm sorry. We've gone well over the 3 minutes. And if the commission has some questions for the other representatives that you have, we will bring them up, okay? We're trying to be fair to everybody. Okay, I'm now going to bring it back to the commission for concerns, questions, deliberation, all those things. And I see a light from Commissioner Big Stick.
Thank you, everyone who's been here. Keeping tally of who was in favor, who was against, it was about equal. I'm kind of left with the same conclusion so far that I had when I walked into the room to begin with. First of all, I'd like to think I'm very pro-development. I understand our city needs money. I understand our city needs housing. I think any housing is a good thing. I have a preference, but I think any housing is a good thing right now. I'd like to make our RENA numbers. And when I read a staff report, I'm inclined to believe what's in front of me. I've heard a lot of arguments from people's direct experience, which makes me want to take a second look at some of the things in the report and consider it more deeply. But when I came in with those experiences on my mind, really, I still had the same conclusion on my mind. So, I'm not a civil engineer. I'm not in construction. I don't know as much about the law as some of the other folk here beside me. Frankly, I'm a storyteller. That's my trade. So I have two stories, one short, one long, and how it informs my process in between. And the short story is, when I first came to Pacifica in the beginning of my life, I think I spent my first 2 or 3 years at 58 Santa Rosa. I have memories from back when I was 2, back when I was 3. And one of the very first memories I have in this life are my parents taking me from our home there on Santa Rosa up to my grandmother's home on Fullerton, the top of the hill, because there was a tidal wave coming. Well, they thought there might be a tidal wave coming. That was how I learned the word tidal wave as a 2, 3-year-old child. And my parents brought me up to the top of a hill because this thing called a tidal wave was on its way. And that's how I got introduced to what it's like to live on the coast. Further back inland than the proposed setbacks here of 68 feet. And that informs my early experience. So waves are inevitable if you're living here on the coast. Frankly, if there's no liability to the city, I figure anyone who wants to move in to a residence that's right here next to the ocean probably has an understanding that it's very likely a wave is about to introduce themselves. I do think it's a good idea to not put a bedroom on the first floor, but I figure if somebody wants to take that risk to their personal space, and there's no liability to the city, I don't have a problem letting them do that. I disagree with the Coastal Commission on the point of thinking in terms of if there's absolutely no protection whatsoever. Before I came into this room, I was willing to give a benefit of the doubt to the idea that the retaining wall could survive another 40 years. Then I heard the term, because of brute force, used, that the retaining wall failed over there, and that immediately came into question in my mind, so I'm less likely now to believe that the retaining wall will be as successful as it might just after hearing those 3 words. And in my mind, if there were a seawall there instead of a retaining wall, I'd be much more inclined to agree that this property is a good idea. So that's what I disagree with on the Coastal Commission. I agreed with something from the Coastal Commission, though, and that informs my longer story. And it has nothing to do with the immediate area. It was 2013. I did something dumb. I was doing a thing and I cut myself. And after I cut myself, it occurred to me immediately, oh, that's not good. Perhaps a professional should look at that. And after enjoying the adrenaline and rushing around trying to look at myself after running my hand in the sink, and verifying, yes, I should have a professional look at that, I had to come to a conclusion. Either I am driving myself to the emergency room because there was nobody else in the house with me at the time, or I'm calling an ambulance to bring me to the emergency room. No cab is going to come quick enough. Back then, Lyft and Uber weren't much of a thing, and I didn't have a smartphone anyway, and I didn't feel like calling an ambulance to bring me all the way, so it was time to hop in my car, considering to myself I'm probably not going to bleed out on the way. I can probably maintain the slowness of the bleed as I go. And then as I was leaving my driveway, I was confronted with 2 different directions I could go to leave my house. And I chose a direction. And at this point, it bears noting, whichever direction I went would inevitably lead me to another point where I could choose one of 2 directions. And I got to enjoy this cascading experience of choices, which of 2 directions I'd like to go every time I hit the end of one of these streets. Until finally, myself and my hand made it to Seton, where they gave me my 4 stitches and sent me on my way, fully able to once again drive myself home. I'm very happy that in that moment I lived at the top of a hill where a wave was not a consideration for me. There was a deer that darted out in front of my car at one point as I was speeding down Fassler, but that had a happy ending after all. And so as I was looking at this property, considering that there is only one way out, and it's very likely that this alleyway behind these adjoining properties maybe can't be accessed by this property, and that's why it's not in the discussion to begin with, I thought to myself, well, if little old me with nobody around and no family to speak of and somebody who's old enough to be able to take himself to an emergency room might be in a pickle, if there happens to be some overtopping and some flooding, and I have to second guess my ability to drive through water, or second guess an ambulance's ability to drive through water, that would probably be a drag. I believe staff when they tell me I could successfully get myself through that water in that moment in time, but as somebody already having an emergency situation, I don't know if I would be in a state of mind to successfully navigate that. But that's just me. And now I'm thinking in terms of 7 residences, where conceivably 7 families are living. I don't know how old these folks living here would be. Maybe they're in their dotage. Perhaps they have newborn children. Maybe in the height of the winter months when the overtopping is at its worst, and in a moment in which it's truly, truly almost inconceivable to navigate those waves pelting the street, one's child is having a fever and needs to get to an emergency room, or a gentleman or a lady is having a heart attack and needs to get to an emergency room. So the place where I agree with the Coastal Commission analysis is that if there were a second way out of that property, even though I question whether or not it would be a good idea to live there from the perspective of whether or not I'll be meeting a wave sooner than later, I think that there's a serious safety concern. And I find that to be inconsistent with the general plan as I currently understand it, because I think that somebody's life could seriously be put at risk if that second way out isn't there. And if a conversation could be had with the adjoining property owners so that maybe there's a way out through that alleyway, I might even probably be inclined to vote in terms of it, although the second I heard the term because brute force was the reason that retaining wall failed, I became a little less inclined to vote in favor of it. But I look forward to hearing if my fellow commissioners wish to dissuade me of the notion that, as it stands, there is a serious safety concern that shows an inconsistency with the general plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Bergman?
Thank you for your concerns. I agree with a lot of what Commissioner Big Stick mentioned. A couple other items. I think it's a good opportunity, one, for housing, which the city needs, the county needs. It's also a good opportunity for the city and the neighbors to work with a development team that's capable to help prevent erosion on a vacant lot, add concerns for the public infrastructure in the right-of-way and the retaining wall. Granted, there are existing properties that people live in that are unfortunately subject to the safety hazards that both Commissioner Big Stick mentioned for access, as well as wave overtopping. But if anything, it's a good opportunity to have more voices and more funds to hopefully upgrade the area. There's a lot of items that some of the comments brought up that are outside of the developer's control and outside of the control of the current property owners. So it's hard to subject the development on this property based on some of those concerns. And that's all I have to say. If anyone else.
Commissioner Niblin?
Thank you. I do appreciate having had the opportunity to hear all the concerns that have been shared, and all the sort of considerations that bear on all this. I have to say that a couple things I want to say. Firstly, probably 2 months ago, I had an opportunity to meet with Mr. Mozami, and we met socially, and I believe this was among the projects that we were discussing. I just wanted the record to reflect that we did have that meeting. I think having, on balance, recognizing that, there are obviously concerns that are important that have been discussed at length. I'm in favor of this project. The first thing I'd say is that this is a high-density area by general plan and by zoning. I think that 7 units, if I'm understanding correctly, is actually the minimum density that's anticipated or contemplated in this particular general plan area. So I don't view this as being out of scale. In fact, it's the scale that's contemplated by the general plan. In fact, maybe some other things in the area are actually not what are contemplated in the general plan. So I agree that there are hazards. It sounds like we've had them looked at closely by staff and by consultants, and on balance, I'm satisfied that those hazards have been addressed and mitigated to the extent they reasonably can be, recognizing that there are trade-offs. Also, obvious concerns about the access to the site, and there's only one way in. It sounds like diligent efforts were made to try to identify a means of addressing all that. As I'm understanding from the city engineer, the maximum ponding would be dealing with, even in circumstances have been described, would be 6 inches of water on the streets. If I want to make sure I understood that correctly, again, given the curb is 6 inches, we'd be looking at 6 inches of ponding and in scenarios that we've been discussing.
Yeah, at the low spot, the ponding would be contained within the travel way of the street, which is with the 6-inch curve, and when the water overtops the curb, it will generally drain over the seawall into the ocean.
And we have a lot of development in this area, and I think we as a city are committed to defending this development, and I think that the more, and this is infill, this is a challenging sort of development. Infill is challenging, and but we are going to defend this area. I think that's part of what we've been talking about, and we, to infill in an area where we intend to defend strikes me as the right thing to do.
Okay, Commissioner Rubenstein is not interested, silent, but thinking, always thinking. So I have some questions and comments. My first comment is that we have a condition to have a structural engineer look at this project and come back with recommendations. We did not see any structural like we did on the last project that was just over here. And the structural that I am looking to see would include this, at least the first building, the front building, being able to survive on its own, irregardless of whether the wall's there or not. That's how I looked at the last one, and that's how I would like to look at this one. I am concerned that the engineering wasn't here for this project and available for us to look at, because this is a big part of what's going to be built there, and it could significantly change the actual project. And I also, in reading the condition, did not see that there was any peer review included in peer review of the structural engineering that was going to be done. And I would like to see peer review also on any structural engineering that is done for this project. I really want to see a project that can survive whether or not that retaining wall, it is not a retaining wall, yeah, it is a retaining wall, not a seawall. I want to make sure that this project is going to survive whether or not the retaining wall's there. And that is really the only way to look at it, because with a 75-year lifespan anticipated for this project, and the biggest number I've heard is that the retaining wall can survive as is, would be 40 years. We still got 35 years that it wouldn't necessarily be there. Failure rate is not necessarily tied to that 40 years, because it's failed before, not due to the straps failing, but to impact, washout underneath, those types of issues. So I really would prefer that we look at this project from a standpoint of do not consider the retaining wall that's there. And we can't consider what isn't there. We can't consider a seawall that might be built there, because it's not there. So I would really want this project to be structurally engineered so that the first building can survive any impacts, including a tsunami coming through. So that would probably mean, like the building we saw before, that it's going to have piers, it's going to have probably a 4-foot thick pad, and it's probably going to have some breakaway on the first floor so that the water can go through, not just lift that building off of there. So those are things I would like to see happen, and I don't see that we can do it tonight. But I would like the applicant to be able to come back with his actual structural engineer drawings so that we could review them and see that they actually appear to be safe to us.
So if I could respond to that. So typically, I think you're referring to condition number 8, which speaks to the tsunami hazard, and at least in part of your comments. When staff initially was discussing this condition with the applicant, we had actually drafted that to state that that building would be a steel-framed building and that it would have breakaway walls. And the applicant requested some flexibility there in case that their structural designers could come up with a different mechanism. So that's the kind of just wanted to give you some of the history of that, and I don't know if you would like the applicant's architect or engineers to speak to that more fully. And then finally, I know that the rest of the commission has to weigh in still on your request to have some analysis as if the wall is not there in terms of, I think, erosion potential. And I understand that comment. The draft adaptation policies that were adopted by the city, they're not policies yet. They haven't been adopted, but staff has been directed to include them in the LCP update that we're preparing. I'm very specifically focused on protection, and that wall that is the city's policy and intention, is to continue to maintain that wall and protect the neighborhood. It protects not only the right-of-way, but also utilities that need protection regardless of this project. So I just wanted to make that comment and hear from the commission if that is something that you would like us to study.
Thank you for that. And I wasn't insisting that there be breakaway walls or any of that stuff, but I personally would like to see it. But if they can come up with a good plan, I definitely want to see whatever structural plan. That's where my comfort level will be in being able to vote for this project. So what I'm basically saying is I would like to continue it until we can see that kind of data. And that's up to my fellow commissioners, not me all by myself. And I believe Commissioner Niblin was first.
Thank you. I guess I wanted to respond, Mr. Chair, to your comment or request for information regarding the structural engineering, more information about the structural engineering. I made reference to kind of steel frame and piers and what have you. And it seems like a reasonable request. I just wanted to make sure I was clear, though, with staff as to when in the ordinary course of things that level of detail would ordinarily be prepared and provided, just because I know there's a significant expense involved in developing that kind of stuff, and I would strike me that it might be something that would be more commonly done after the entitlements are actually in hand.
That is correct. We would usually review that material, structural calcs, at the time of building permit. There may be something short of that can be prepared, some more information provided to the commission. So
I would ask my fellow commissioner whether there might be something maybe short of the full sort of a Monty, so to speak, that you would ordinarily see in a situation like this might be satisfactory in order to get.
That is distinctly possible. I also see that this is of benefit to the applicant in terms of he will be able to see whether or not this is going to pencil out once he actually sees what his structural requirements are going to be to get this thing done.
Well, just stating my ordinary sort of assumption and bias would be toward having some sort of the greater level of detail at a later point in the process where staff would typically be looking at that. And I guess my second point, it goes to the planning director's sort of comment that with respect to the sort of the extent to which we ought to be analyzing sort of the building one in particular, or the building closest, furthest west, without the presence of the retaining wall. I myself don't see that as an exercise that would be necessary for my own comfort, just because, frankly, my view is that the wall's going to be there. I mean, there are other things that we're protecting that are significantly important to the city that are reliant on that wall, and it's the stated, it will be the stated policy of the city that the wall be there. So I don't see a need to engage in that exercise, but that's my position.
Mr. Chair, if I may add as well, we had, as staff, encouraged the applicant to bring as much of his team as he possibly could, and his structural engineer is in attendance, and should it be the commission's will, you may be able to query him for more information about what considerations went into the structural design and how he believes it likely would be robust enough to meet the site conditions. And just to round out the point on the structural details, the project that came before you previously at 2105 Beach Boulevard, which is the project I assume you're referring to, you'll remember that was an anomaly in the sense that that project had made it nearly all the way to obtaining a building permit and had been engineered and designed to that level of detail. And as has been stated already, that's the exception, not the rule for projects.
Thank you for that. I will want to talk to the structural engineer in a bit, but I'm going to allow Commissioner Big Stick to have his comment.
I was just going to follow up on what you were saying about thinking about it in terms of if there was no wall. I agree with Commissioner Niblin in that I think there will be a retaining wall there that we're going to continue to maintain until we get a seawall there. But if we're thinking in terms of if there's no retaining wall, then absolutely I couldn't vote for the project tonight, although I'd be very interested in casting a vote after there's a seawall, but we're talking about years at that point. I wanted to clarify that when I was talking about my concerns getting out from the one-way area, not merely flooding, but also sinkholes, because when I heard that term, brute force was the cause of retaining wall failure, that says to me that anywhere on that retaining wall, and at first I was just thinking outside of the driveway, but then it occurred to me it's going to be extended. If there are substantial sinkholes going on there because of brute force, then that's a problem if you need to drive in or out of it. All that having been said, I'd be happy to vote in favor of a continuance if that is the commission's pleasure.
Thank you for that. I would like to bring up the structural engineer and ask him a few questions.
Michael Connell, civil engineer for the applicant.
Okay, Michael, there is a structural engineer for the applicant also, correct?
Are you asking about the tsunami hazard? I'll be speaking about that if that's what your inquiry's about.
Well, who is going to do the actual structural engineering drawings when and if this project moves forward? Is that going to be you, or is that going to be the gentleman?
I don't think that's been determined yet. I think Peter was hired to look at the seawall. If it's all right with you, I would like to speak about the tsunami hazard condition and why the applicant requested flexibility there.
Okay, go forward.
Okay. So the original condition read, "Thou shalt not have wood framing, structural wood framing on the lower floor." And we requested some flexibility with that condition based on our experience at the 535 San Pedro Avenue project, mixed-use building, where we were approved with a condition that said no structural wood framing on the lower floor because it was in the tsunami inundation zone. And then we hired a tsunami engineering expert who did a detailed study and said, you guys are right on the limit of you're on the edge of this tsunami inundation zone, and we would anticipate 6 inches to 1 foot of water in there. There's no reason to do anything special with your structural design as long as you have a 1 foot tall concrete curb around the building. But because we were conditioned with a very specific condition that said no structural wood framing on the lower floor, we had to kind of pivot to a steel frame building or go back to the commission and request that change.
So the reason that the applicant requested some flexibility in that condition was because it's hard right now to determine the water level, anticipated water level at the site. There's different inundation maps. You've probably heard of the Sapphire map, and I think that's an area that before informing the decision about the structural design of the building, the applicant would like to have more information on anticipated water level, right? If the water level is 8 feet, then you're in a position where you need to have piers and breakaway walls and concrete columns. If the water level is 1 foot or less, it's a different design. So that was the kind of nexus behind requesting flexibility on that condition. And I think staff did a good job crafting that condition, providing the flexibility, but still addressing the potential tsunami hazard.
Okay. The level that's been stated is the level based on tsunamis that might come down from Alaska, as I
Correct.
remember my
Yes.
reading. But the other levels, potential levels, are from anything that might happen out in the Pacific, from anything from an earthquake very close to, say, a small asteroid strike in the middle of the ocean. The heights of the actual tsunamis, there's got to be some kind of a range that I know that.
Yes, as I understand it, there is.
Where my mind's
right,
going.
and there's some differences between the maps. Like the Cal OES map is kind of, I'm going to simplify this, but it's every possible situation that you could ever imagine happening, and that's the inundation line. But that map is used for evacuation planning. It even says that at the bottom of the map. There's a big disclaimer. The Sapphire map, which stands for Science Application of Risk Reduction, is it's a hypothetical inundation limit, hypothetical but plausible based on an earthquake that happens off the coast of Alaska, which is where kind of historically we've experienced tsunamis in California from these earthquakes off the coast of Alaska. That inundation line kind of it just touches the front of this site. And so that inundation line doesn't necessarily mean there's 8 feet of water there and then it stops, because you wouldn't have sort of a vertical column of water. The end of the inundation line is essentially the 0 inches of water. So, that's what was driving the revision to that condition. It's just there is a range, and that the applicant is going to do some more detailed study of that range before informing the structural design of the building.
Okay. And he has not hired the structural engineer who's going to actually investigate and do the planning for that?
I don't think so, but jump in if I'm wrong.
The intent of the condition, I believe, was to have the structural engineer, design the first floor of that building to make it tsunami resistant. So typically, CDs and structural comes after your planning approval. So we don't have a structural engineer designing the building, but we believe that, our structural engineer in the city's building department and will do a great job making sure that building is tsunami resistant. And I think it's up to the discretion of the planning director to approve the design ultimately. So that's a step that comes later typically. But I think, as Michael Connell pointed out, the tsunami inundation line proclaims inches of water at the front of our site. So again, we don't have to. We think we're kind of going above and beyond, but that step comes later in the process.
If we were to make a change to that particular condition, that your structural engineer, whoever you happen to hire, also has to be peer reviewed, would you object to that or be willing to go along with that?
The applicant doesn't object to that, and that's consistent with what staff has required on other projects, right? The 535 project had a similar language in the condition. And then the other thing I'll point out about the condition, I believe it says tsunami resistant, assuming a tsunami level of the substantial height of the first floor. Is that correct, Christian?
It talks about the recommendations shall be based upon a potential tsunami inundation of a substantial portion of the first floor, shall be focused on preventing the collapse of the structure due to tsunami forces, and shall be incorporated into the design and construction of the west building, which is building number 1. This is from condition number 8 on packet page 87. And I'll add, perhaps there's importance or some purpose served by an additional peer review, but whatever this design proposal is will be ultimately reviewed by the city's technical experts through the building review process. And so certainly there could be yet another level of peer review inserted into this, but it's not as though the applicant's recommendations will go unevaluated by the city's technical experts.
Again, can I say one more thing about the tsunami resistant design? So that in San Mateo County, unincorporated areas along the coast, they have kind of prescriptive guidelines, which I think they would lend themselves pretty well to this, but those include, drilled period foundation, concrete columns on the ground floor, and so that's, and breakaway walls, and so that's certainly a possibility here. It's just an option. There are other ways that you could design the building to resist the tsunami forces.
Thank you very much for your answers. I appreciate them. Commissioner Niblin?
And thank you. Actually, this is a question for, I guess, Messrs. Mozami and maybe Mr. O'Connell as well. And the other part of the condition that we were talking about really dealt with the first floor bedroom, or actually the moving of a first floor bedroom. And we had some comment on that, I think, even as we were taking a comment from the public. Do you have a particular position with respect to that condition? I mean, are you okay with agreeing to it, whether or not you think it's warranted or not? I just wanted to see if you all had a position with respect to that condition.
You should probably answer that. Whether we're okay with that condition?
That's my question. Are you okay with that condition?
Yes, we're okay with it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else? Any more questions for anybody?
Question for the city attorney, actually, just trying to refresh my recollection with respect to the commission bylaws, since we don't have a full complement here, what constitutes a sufficient number of votes to carry a measure?
It'd be a straight majority.
A straight majority of those present?
Yes.
Thank you.
And just to be clear, we're back to the commission for further deliberation.
That is correct. So is there any more deliberation? Anybody want to say something? Got no lights. Commissioner Niblin.
I'm ready to make a motion. Just what happens.
Okay.
I want to move that the Planning Commission finds the project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, approves the Site Development Permit PSD 82918, Coastal Development Permit CDP 39518, Use Permit UP 9418, Variance PV 52218, Investing Tentative Subdivision Map Sub 23718 by adopting the resolution included as Attachment A to the staff report, including conditions of approval in Exhibit A of the resolution, and incorporates all maps and testimony into the record by reference.
Commissioner, if I may, on condition number 1, staff would like to change the plans entitled Palmetto Avenue to plans entitled 1567 Beach Boulevard. This was...
I'm sorry, you said condition 1 had an address you needed to change?
So, yes, it says development shall be substantially in accord with the plans entitled. Currently, it says Palmetto Avenue. It should say 1567 Beach Boulevard.
I understand. I'll change my motion with respect to the conditions to incorporate that change.
Thank you.
And we'll say that reflects that. Commissioner Rubenstein.
I'd like to second Commissioner Neblin's motion.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Okay, we have an approved project, 3 voting yes and 2 voting no. Congratulations, your project's been approved. And we'll move on to the next item. Oh, and let me state that anyone aggrieved by the Planning Commission's decision has 10 calendar days to appeal to the City Council. Thank you very much. And this project also is appealable to the Coastal Commission, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So there's also the appeal option to the Coastal Commission. All right, that's that one out of the way. Okay, we are now on to...
Just to be clear, it's 10 days from today, so it would be May 16th.
By 5 p.m. of next week, Thursday. So.
The 16th.
All right, we are now going to move on to item number 2. Thank everybody from staff and the engineering department for your time and energy on this one. So now I'm moving on to the public hearing where am I?
2212 Beach Boulevard.
Yeah, I'm not seeing what I need to read.
It's 9:30, that's why.
What page is that on? If you could.
176.
Oh, I see. I don't have the.
The face page of the agenda there.
I don't have the face page for the agenda, which is leaving me at a loss. I'm good. I got that. I'm sorry, people. I'm getting tired. Okay, item number 2, file number 2018-035, development agreement, DA-1-18, site development permit, PSD-834-18, coastal development permit, CDP 397-18, use permit, UP-107-18, parking exception, PE 184-19, vested tentative subdivision map, SUB 242-19, and heritage tree removal authorization for construction of a new 2 to 3-story mixed-use building consisting of subdivision airspace to create condominiums on a 5,446 square foot vacant parcel located in the vicinity of 2001 Palmetto. And staff report, please.
Good evening, I'm contract planner Anu Agarwal, and the project before you includes the development of a mixed-use building consisting of 993 square feet of first-floor commercial space that would front on Palmetto Avenue and 3 residential condominium units. One of the condominium units would be a studio unit located above the commercial space, and 2 3-bedroom units will occupy the rear 3/4 of the site. The project requires a site development permit, a coastal development permit, use permit, parking exception, subdivision tentative map, and heritage tree removal authorization, as well as an authorization to provide the required number of vehicles and bicycle parking spaces for the commercial component of the project through a parking district. Based on an analysis of the project with respect to each of these permits, staff has found that the project is consistent with the findings for these entitlement requests as the project is conditioned. Related to the parking exception, the applicant is seeking approval of a development agreement to establish certain public and private benefits. The development agreement is being sought as the project is seeking entitlements prior to a parking district being established. This development agreement would allow the project to move forward while the market is ripe. Public benefits include specifying the type of commercial use within the project as a restaurant or a cafe, and use incentives, early contribution by the applicant to the creation of public parking facilities, and contributions to aid in the promotion of economic development along Palmetto Avenue. The private benefits would include vested rights to proceed with development under the city's current land use regulations for a certain period of time, and initial permit term of up to 5 years with provision of a 2-year extension. Normally, it would be 1 year in the coastal zone. The development agreement requires Planning Commission recommendation to City Council and final adoption of an ordinance by City Council to approve the agreement. Staff has included a condition of approval that would delay the effectiveness of any development permit approvals until the effective date of an ordinance approving the proposed development agreement. Overall, the project would further the objectives for the area incorporated in the West Sharp Park neighborhood narrative, which envisions development along Palmetto Avenue to be mixed with commercial and high-density residential uses. So staff recommends approval of the project as it has been conditioned. That concludes staff presentation. If there are any questions.
Are there any questions for staff? Commissioner Big Stick.
Sure. Given how much time I've already taken up, I have one real question pertaining, and that's just a matter of the bikes. Is it possible just to stick a bike rack in front of the business as a, I understand it, we need to defer the other 20 spaces for the time being, it makes sense. I'm interested into whether or not there's actually been discussion of where we would put that, but I figure that's a part of a bigger picture that we could look at a further date. But then I came to the part about the 2 bike spaces, and if it's 3 feet by 6 foot, I understand how there needs to find that spot for the 36 square feet Gesundheit. But is it possible just to stick a bike rack in front of the business so that if there are 2 bikes, they could put their bikes there and continue making it, in the meantime, bike-friendly?
Sure. So there are a number of considerations related to placement of the bicycle parking spaces. The site itself, as you probably recognize from the plans, is rather constrained based on the proposal and the applicant's attempts to comply with as many of the development standards as possible in the city's zoning requirements. So I don't know that it would be possible to place it on site, even towards the front of the site. If you're referring to the area in the public right-of-way in front of the site, the sidewalk there is not particularly wide. It's probably not a suitable location for installing a bicycle rack. You can see, I believe, just to the south of this, south of Montecito on Palmetto Avenue, there's a bump out in the street for a bicycle rack. I believe it's south, I'm not sure exactly how far, but close to the site. We believe that that type of solution is probably most appropriate for the Palmetto commercial area and the Sharp Park District more broadly. We believe that through the specific plan process, that would be the best time to determine those locations and the method of that installation, and through part of the development agreement, there would be funds available for that planning process.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Not seeing any, I'm going to speak again. You're not going to keep me quiet, that's it. One thing I meant to do on the last project that was before us, and it's owned by the same company, is to make a point of the fact that my company, named Phoenix Remodeling, has absolutely nothing to do with Phoenix Capital. There is no connection. It's serendipity. And so I have no financial interest in this project whatsoever.
Thank you, Chair Clifford. And just to clarify, it's two different entities. One is Phoenix Capital 65, and the other one is Phoenix Capital 15 LLC. Two different LLCs, but thank you for the clarification.
But both of them I have no connection to. It's just that my name is Phoenix Remodeling, and I compliment them on the choice of name. I wanted to get that out of the way. And then I had some questions around, first, the parking exception in terms of 20 off-street vehicle parking. And I get that they can't put it in there without pretty much removing the entire restaurant. There wouldn't be any room for a restaurant there. But I would like to know from staff is the parking district that they are talking about, it doesn't exist as of yet.
No.
Is there even a site been eyeballed for this, and what is being thought of in terms of where this parking district is actually going to find the parking for this area? Because I'm sure this is coming up again.
Right. So I think you're touching, Chair Clifford, on one of the fundamental issues with the types of infill development that we're hoping to achieve in this part of town along Palmetto and in several other parts of town, including Pedro Point and elsewhere, where we have a very small lot pattern from historic subdivisions which don't quite reflect the types of sites you would hope to have for many types of modern commercial development, certainly since the advent of the automobile in many respects. And so with these sites being subdivided in most cases in the early 1900s, automobile parking in the form of off-street parking lots was not contemplated. And so with that in mind, we have to make the best of what we have. And so you are correct in the sense that the parking district has not been formed. We believe there's a reasonable expectation that it ultimately will be formed for this neighborhood as part of the Sharp Park specific plan process. When the staff brought the contract for preparation of the Sharp Park specific plan to the City Council in January of this year, one of the optional tasks that was presented to the Council for consideration was the study of the creation of a Sharp Park parking district. And the Council supported that concept and in fact funded that optional task as part of the contract. And so we believe that there's at least initial conceptual support for this. Certainly the devil can be in the details, and so determining sites, determining number of spaces, the form of parking, all of those types of considerations are most appropriate to be done through the Sharp Park specific plan process. Similarly to Commissioner Big Stick's questions about where and in what form should the bicycle parking take, we think that the Palmetto area commercial district as it functions today and as we hope it functions in the future should be comprehensively assessed and the best balance of facilities be decided as part of a thorough planning process.
Thank you for that answer. I appreciate it. And my other big question was around the proposal for five years plus 2 on the, I mean, that's pretty out of our normal way of doing things. It's generally a year later, and then they basically, the planning director decides that, and then beyond that, it would come to the planning commission for a renewal of the permits. So we're talking 7 years out, which I'm a little disturbed by, because I don't want to see it wait 7 years to get done. So I'm curious that that's being asked, that length of time is being asked for.
Sure. I'll offer a couple observations, and then perhaps Planning Director Wermeister or Assistant City Attorney Bizzano will have additional thoughts. Certainly the period of permit approvals, the term being sought is much longer than our normal 1-year approval term for projects in the coastal zone. I will add that under state law, approvals, including subdivisions, are automatically allowed to be approved for 2 years and may often be extended for another year. So I think the fair comparison is 3 years to 5 years, and then certainly the extension bears on the 7-year term as you cited it. With that in mind, I would suggest that the applicant has every financial incentive to pursue the project as quickly as possible. They don't make money from a vacant site, and I think they're in the business of making money. And so it's my belief that they will pursue this project as aggressively as the market conditions will allow. And I would offer that having such a term of 5 + 2 years may in fact make the project more likely to be ultimately constructed, in the sense that with too short permit terms, small fluctuations in the market can result in inevitable delays due to financing and other reasons that cause project entitlements to lapse. And with the heightened scrutiny of annual permit renewals, I would suggest that having a greater certainty would allow the applicant to weather any short period of economic turmoil and ultimately come back and construct the project without expired entitlements, which would present a high bar to any future applicant or even this owner returning to re-entitle the project. So I think it's a strength for providing some certainty and robustness to the approvals. If the commission believes this is actually the best project for this site in Palmetto, which in staff's assessment, it's a quality project that's befitting an approval as conditioned. Anything?
I would only add that the applicant has expressed that they're very interested in getting started in the current market as it is now, and that you may want to ask this question of the applicant as well, and perhaps he can speak to that.
Thank you very much for that. I have a light from Commissioner Big Stick.
Yeah, it's more for my personal education, perhaps the education of anyone watching, more than any kind of contention. So on page 282, attachment D, the development agreement, when I came to, we're in Article 5, 5.3, sales tax, point of sale designation. And especially the use tax direct payment permit. The sense I got as I was reading it was essentially what that's in there for is so that as things are being constructed, we maximize the tax coming into the city. But I didn't understand the language quite to the extent that I was confident in how I was reading it. And so if you could just enlighten me exactly what that use tax direct payment permit, just how that works a little bit.
Thank you. Yes, you're exactly correct. It's so that the city can maximize the sales tax within the city limits.
And, what does it say? Is the idea that things are mostly purchased in town and contracted in town? Is that, if at all possible, is that more or less the idea?
Right. Provision 5.3 starts off, developers shall use good faith, diligent efforts to the extent allowed by law to require all persons and entities, and it goes on. So yes, it's to the extent that they use their good faith efforts to comply with that provision.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more lights for questions. Would the applicant please come up, and you'll have 10 minutes for your project.
Good evening. Looks like we're the late show, so I'll try to keep this brief and to the point. I'm the architect working with the project team. Chris Hall is my name, and I work with a firm specializing kind of uniquely in infill development for residential areas. So, was very happy to take on this challenge and the nuances that are kind of endemic and kind of having to design around a tight context. So we've been working closely with the city, and I think we have a design here that really addresses the situation well. So I'm going to kind of go through these slides quickly, and then we'll have a time for questions, and also the applicant will stand up at the end, but I'm going to do the first 5 minutes here. The site, obviously, you can see here in red in reference to the pier along Palmetto Avenue between Santa Maria and Montecito. A closer shot shows you that there is, in fact, significant vacant land near there for future developments. We really see this as a early piece of the puzzle in what is a larger, development trend, hopefully along Palmetto, and wanting to fit into that. There's a large tree you can see on the neighboring parcel, and the trees on our parcel will be removed to make room for the development. I think there's an arborist report about a larger pine tree that is not in very good shape, but other than that, it's covered with sort of smaller trees. This is, excuse the blurriness, but it's just illustrating a kind of view from the site about at the level of the residences, and it speaks to the orientation of wanting to orient the residential development towards these very filtered views, but views where, you do get a snippet of blue water and a kind of a view of the green of Maury Point to the south, granted between other developments. Some of the adjacent structures, there's a residential structure to the north directly, and then there's a mixed-use structure to the south. Across the street is, of course, a vacant lot. So this kind of site plan best describes the layout on the site. It is a tight site, and the trick was how to, kind of create the mixed-use commercial frontage, maximize it to provide as big enough a space as possible for a viable retail operation, which again is anticipated to be a cafe or a restaurant. There's a narrow pass-through that leads you into this kind of this muse condition that provides kind of privacy for the residential units. There are two townhomes that are about 2,100 square feet, 3 to 4 bedrooms on 3 levels, 2 levels over a garage. And then there's a kind of a live-work type unit that is over the commercial space, and we thought there's also the interesting potential of that being linked in kind of a mom and pop store type of, to appeal to that type of a local retailer potentially. The front unit has a 1-car garage, and you can see the stairs kind of going up right behind the restaurant space. The other 2 units have 2-car garages and direct entry onto the what I call the Muse, which will be kind of a nice paved area, which will double as where the kids have the basketball hoop and whatever. This is not going to be very trafficked, obviously, because the traffic is limited to the 3 units that come through that passageway. This is just showing some quick character inspiration. The kind of color palette, I think muted colors that sort of blend into the wood, the surrounding trees, a combination of wood and blackened metal and some kind of stucco. You see these light tones of stucco here on the right is what we're planning. The front of the building and the kind of more commercial facade, I think we were looking at a range of kind of coastal California architecture from maybe down south to up Northern California. The residential characters is more kind of typical of Marin County or around Pacifica, just the sort of style of it. But we wanted kind of a traditional storefront look. There are design guidelines, I believe, for Palmetto that Avenue that kind of illustrate that too. So you've got a traditional kind of awning windows, transom windows over high doors with an awning in between, and then just a simple three windows above for that live workspace above. There is also a deck over that passageway that serves the residential unit above the store, and I believe the ceiling height in the store is 15 feet clear, which allows for a lot of different retail uses. This is a view looking at the elevation sort of facing the Muse, which is the orientation of the residential development. I mean, they obviously have windows on the north side too, but this is the best exposure and also the most width of the lot is between the lot line and this facade. Substantial balconies on both levels for both units, and then the terrace over the passageway for the live-work unit. These are just floor plans of the second and third levels. The loft unit over the commercial space is left relatively open, and I think would be partitioned at the building permit level. And then the layouts for the other townhomes are just for trying to serve the traditional needs of a family or other user that needs a larger 3 to 4 bedroom type layout. And then these are the remaining elevations. The one facing the property to the north is on the bottom, and the side elevation facing towards the west, the ocean, is on the top left. So that kind of wraps up the design presentation. I think Sia was going to speak a little bit to the public benefits, but we're here to answer questions.
Thank you, Chris. Good evening, commissioners, again. So I think I'll be pretty short with Palmetto. I think the city has, for a long time, had a vision for Palmetto, a walkable Main Street. And to get there, I think, there's a few things that we need, and one of them is housing, right? So you need housing, you need retail. Density supports the retail, office, housing. Don't quote me, but I think it was 40... You need 40 square feet of residential for 10 square feet of retail. Michael Connell may know the equation better than I, but you need a captive audience. So the idea is we bring bodies to the neighborhood, and the townhomes hopefully are home to families. 11 new children living in 4 condominiums. They go to the bookstore. They go to the ballet place that's behind the antique shop. I think just on Montecito Avenue and Santa Rosa, there's like 4 ballerinas that weren't there before. So that's the idea. My daughter goes to the ballet school. She takes swimming classes at Oceania. We go to Salida Beach Cafe, grab coffee. We come back and stop at Chit Chat Cafe for a donut on the way home. So we contribute. That's the idea. The housing also subsidizes the retail. So retail is expensive. Restaurants oftentimes need contribution from landlords. They need free rent. They need a lot of things. So, I think, don't thank me, but thank the property owner, John Hanson, for agreeing to pay $60,000 for a parking exception, which is, above and beyond the city's requirement, and also contribute $30,000 towards the economic development of Palmetto. And so that can hopefully go a long way with the parking district, specific plan, priority development area, however the city decides to move forward. And then, obviously our food use is a priority, and we've even talked about doing it ourselves if we can't lure a restaurateur in. So that's, I think we'd like to see something come into Palmetto that's different and, not only be an amenity for the neighborhood, but also the visitors that come walk the berm. So that's the idea. Community outreach. I think, we had a neighborhood meeting at the Grape and the Fog, so we also notified adjacent property owners. Most people that showed up were, interested in the beach, obviously, but we did community outreach early on. We talked to all the adjacent property owners, and in fact, I guess I can say that we had probably a lot of supporters for this project as well, but most of them wrote letters and couldn't make attendance tonight. So I think I'm over my limit, but I'm here if you have any other questions.
Does anybody here have any questions? I'm not seeing any, but I do have one. Yes. Could you lightly touch on the need for reducing the driveway down from the standard 20 feet to the 11 feet
so
of edges?
Sure, and I think the architect or the civil would be better suited to answer the safety of the reduced driveway width, but we think it's feasible, and we thought by widening it, we'd be compromising the retail space, and I think you don't want to already, it's a challenge to get a restaurant or food use in there, and by diminishing that space and making it narrower, I think it poses more of a challenge, so, and we didn't want to do that.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, if there's no other questions, I have a light. Commissioner Berman?
Yeah, just one came up as you were speaking. So for the restaurant, for delivery service, I noticed, so the studio unit is proposed to have a deck. Is there anticipation that delivery service could still access under that deck and perhaps use, or would that conflict with the residents' parking, or is delivery service anticipated for the street?
Are you, if you look at the front elevation, do you mean the deck on top of the drive aisle?
Yes.
Okay. I think you mean takeout or for?
Delivery service for the restaurant, food supplies,
got it.
or
Okay.
even collections for garbage, recycling, compost.
I'd better let the architect address that one.
Just wondering, given that it's kind of a mixed-use area.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be served off the street typically. There's a trash room that happens to be on that alley, and I would anticipate, wheeling trash out from that under, the passageway. But the idea would not be that a truck or a van backs into that and blocks the residential location to serve it. I think it's pretty common in more urban situations and very small retail frontage that it's just front-loaded service.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And not seeing any more questions, I'm going to open the public portion of this hearing. If anybody would like to speak to this project, please fill out a card and come on up. I think this is it for this one. Oh, this is item number 2. Item number 2.
Do I have the right item number written down?
Yes, and I actually misunderstood, and I have a couple more cards also. I don't know if they're still here or not, but I have their cards. Aaron, would you go ahead and...
Thank you. I will keep it brief. Good evening. Again, my name is Erin Macias. I'm not quite sure if it's the time of night or the item number, but the room's certainly emptied out. This low-density project is consistent with the plan for Palmetto. I just want to briefly support what is being proposed tonight. I also would like to quickly speak about our walkability and our bike scores in the city of Pacifica. Adding the bike lanes, adding mixed-use development, we're increasing our walkability and our bike scores, which will eventually result in the increase of our transit scores as well. So this is a really good plan for the city of Pacifica to promote this type of sustainable development. And just to reiterate my earlier comments, we need to fund our city, and I think it's a beautiful plan. It's going to add a nice restaurant and some low-density housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Is David Leela? Oh, yeah. Leo? Yeah, I'm not even going to say it. Is David still here?
I am.
I'm getting a little tongue-tied at this point.
Good evening, Commission, City staff. My name is David Leal. I am a resident of West Sharp Park, live closer to this project than the previous one, and I just want to say I'm in favor of this project. It is a tough site. It's a site that we need to infill in West Sharp Park to keep up the momentum of the development on Sharp Park. We've went through the phase 1 of the Palmetto Streetscape. We're trying to change that neighborhood for the better, and this project is one of many currently going on that will keep up that momentum in this neighborhood. brings much-needed housing. It also brings retail space, which is much needed, or commercial space, which is much needed in the city of Pacifica. The site is a tough site. When I first saw the plans, and I was around when the site was for sale, and I was a little bit of a pessimist on what they could actually do on that site. And seeing the plans, I'm actually pretty impressed with what they can get on that site. And it definitely fits in with the other development that are adjacent to that property, and hopefully development that goes in across the street in that vacant site. What else? There was mention of the parking. I would like to commend the developer on the proposal to provide $60,000 for the parking study. It is needed in West Sharp Park. I live less than 2 blocks from this site. While parking, I don't see it being a concern for this project. We do need to assess the parking situation, because as more infill lots get filled, and other lots that currently have structures get flipped to what they're zoned for, parking may become an issue. And so living in the neighborhood and knowing the sites and commuting, that lot on Francisco is ripe for a multiple story, perhaps a small 2-story parking garage, but that's just my opinion. The city-owned lot on Francisco, to clarify. So, like I said, I'm in favor of this project, would like to see it move forward, would like to continue the progress on Palmetto, and hope you approve this project tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott Frazier, are you still here? No, looks like he may have gone home. And I don't see Robin Reneel out there, but if Robin is there, she also has an additional option to talk. Nope, that's the end of my cards then. I'm going to close the public portion of this hearing, and the owner now has the opportunity to come back up and speak for 3 minutes if he so chooses.
I think we've addressed the commission, and we can use this time to address any more questions, but I think we're fine with our presentation so far.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to now bring it back to the commission for deliberation.
If I may? Oh, maybe later. This is not the right time, I'm sorry. Okay. I would like to enter in the record that a condition number 36 in the packet needs to be replaced with a condition that I'd like to read in the record.
Okay, would you go
If they
ahead and
would
read
like.
that, please?
If the utility connections are already stubbed out to the property or along the existing sidewalk, then pavement restoration along Palmetto Avenue shall not be required. If trenching or other access beneath the pavement of Palmetto Avenue is needed to access utility connections, then applicant shall restore the existing street and slurry seal to the limits of all trenching or to the street center line, whichever is greater, across the entire property frontage. If, in the opinion of the city engineer, damage to the pavement during construction is more extensive, the applicant may be required to slurry seal a larger area. Applicant shall replace all pavement markings and markers in kind. This is in replacement to condition number 36 on packet page 246.
And Mr. Chair, if I could provide a bit of context, we don't know yet how the commission's deliberations will go, but in the event of a project approval, we realized after we published the report that our standard condition related to restoration of pavement after trenching for utilities needed some better clarification to reflect the site specifics of this project site, in the sense that the Palmetto Avenue streetscape is a relatively recent public improvement. Typically, there's a 3-year moratorium from excavations into the public right-of-way following a significant pavement project. And so we wanted to have the appropriate conditional language in there to meet the circumstances where the moratorium is in effect now, and we believe that the utilities may be stubbed out, but just in case they're not and they need to go into the street, we have the basis covered.
Thank you very much for that explanation and for the change in the condition. We'll make sure that we reflect that. Commissioner Big Stick?
Sure. So I think something I didn't say about the last item was I actually did enjoy the architecture. It looked pretty. And I really like the design of this one, too. I think it fits in well with the neighborhood. I think it's exactly the sort of development that was intended when the Palm Meadows streetscape, finally Phase 1 came to pass. I'm kind of eager for the Sharp Park specific plan so that when things come down the pike in the future, it's easy to say, yes, that clearly fits in, but I think, yes, this clearly fits in. I'm a nitpicker. I could nitpick a thing or two. Mostly the night bike rack is as much as I would want to nitpick, and that's fine. So since I spent so much time giving reasons why I didn't favor the last item, I very much favor this one and would like to make a motion if and when the time comes to approve.
Okay. We'll give the other commissioners an opportunity to speak. Commissioner Niblin?
I just wanted to mention, firstly, I share Commissioner Big Stick's feelings about this particular project. I did, as I noted with respect to the last item, have an opportunity to meet with Mr. Moazami, and I am almost certain we discussed this project at the time that we met.
Okay. Commissioner Berman?
I'm ready to make a motion if, I was going to second Commissioner Big Stick's motion if you were to proceed. But if anyone else has.
We can flip a coin for that if you would like. Commissioner Rubenstein, do you have anything to say while you're?
You know, I mean, I like this project as well, so I think it's a good infill project for this location. I would just mention that it is right next door to the marijuana use that we approved. So, but yeah, so I'm happy to second the motion.
And I'm actually very happy with this project. It being next to the marijuana project, the restaurant food service might look towards snackies. It might be appropriate. I'm not saying that they have to do that. Commissioner Big Stick.
I'm glad you made the humorful remark. I was too reserved to go all the way with it. And with that said, I would like to move that the Planning Commission finds the project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act and recommend the City Council approve the development agreement DA-1-18, approve site development permit PSD-834-18, coastal development permit CDP-397-18, use permit UP-107-18, parking exception PE-184-19, vesting tentative subdivision map SUB-242-19, and authorize removal of a heritage tree by adopting the resolution included as attachment A to the staff report, including conditions of approval in Exhibit A of the resolution, and incorporate all maps, testimony into the record by reference with number 36, condition amended as suggested.
Thank you very much for that. Do I have a second? Commissioner Berman?
I second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please vote. Congratulations, you have an approved project. It was an unanimous approval. For anyone who is aggrieved by the decision of the Planning Commission, you have 10 calendar days to appeal this decision in writing to the City Council. And also, because it is in the coastal zone, you have the right to appeal to the Coastal Commission. Is that correct?
This site, in fact, is not located in the appeals jurisdiction for the coastal zone. But if I may add just a clarifying point, it's a bit uncommon for us to have projects which include project permits as well as an ordinance component as part of the development agreement, such as in this project. So we will see what happens with the 10-day appeal period, and then we will consider the appropriate timing of scheduling this item for a public hearing at the City Council on introduction of the ordinance to enact the development agreement.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, now moving on, and wait on that. Commission communications. Commissioner Big Stick.
Sure. So first of all, and I have two, I attended the City Council meeting 2 weeks ago on April 22nd as the liaison, as they were voting on the amendments to the cannabis ordinance. There was very little discussion. It passed unanimously, and that's what happened there. The other thing I have to report on, I attended a seminar by 21 Elements. I think the idea of this meeting was it's designed primarily for new planning commissioners. I attended, and Commissioner Berman attended also. She might want to speak on that also. But it was intended for new commissioners in theory, but I was sat next to a Half Moon Bay commissioner who's serving his 4th term. The lady next to me from Millbrae has been doing this for 5 years, so I was in good company from whom I could learn. The topic of discussion that evening, designing our future, current issues in housing. So it was mostly about affordable housing and the issues of affordable housing, which is something that our city is certainly grappling with and discussing thoroughly lately. It was wonderful to have all that experience informing me in that room, and it was an interesting discussion, a lot of interesting things about how making ADUs work in terms of affordable housing is a great approach. As I was discussing with my fellow commissioners, increasing density and minding the environment were the two components, it seemed like, to ultimately getting the job done. Further discussion was something along the lines of, if everybody's making little efforts, ultimately it serves to make a big impact. And these were my main takeaways from the evening. It was a good evening, and I'm hopeful for the future as we dive into the struggle to make affordable housing a reality. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else?
I have nothing to add. I think Commissioner Big Stick summed it up well, and Pacifica is working to build more affordable housing, and I think I encourage the community to be involved with the outreach as well, to be educated for the need of affordable housing.
Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to make a very big thank you for all of staff's efforts tonight. Everybody, all the ones that have even left, I want to thank you. You made a really very good effort on our behalf, and I'm quite pleased with how things turned out. That's me. Okay, staff communications.
Just a couple dates, or a few dates to remind you of. So as Chair Clifford mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, Monday the 13th, it's the Commission and Committee annual reports to City Council, starting at 5:45, I believe. So if you can make it, we hope that you will be there. We have our next Home for All community convening to talk about housing, and that is on Tuesday, the 21st. It's going to be at IBL Ingrid B. Lacey Middle School. It'll start at 6 p.m. and dinner will be provided. And lastly, I just wanted to pitch that the council will hear on the 28th, it's a Tuesday because of the holiday, and they will consider the final conceptual design for the library project. So I just wanted to mention that if you're interested. Thank you.
Chair, can I ask a question just about the convening on the Home for All? Is the format going to be similar to the format that we experienced on the Saturday morning a couple of weeks ago?
That's right. So the balance will shift, I think, just slightly a little bit more to informational presentation, in the sense that we're following up on some of the housing solutions the community identified, but it will be a small group, roundtable, talk to your neighbor, facilitated conversation during the engagement portions, just like last time, which I think people found very valuable to relate their opinions and perspectives on housing.
Sure, thank you.
And thank you. If that's all from staff, we're on to that last part of our agenda. Commissioner Niblin.
I'll move that we adjourn.
Okay. Do I have a second? Commissioner Big Stick.
I will second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please vote. Oh, all of us voted for that? Okay. The motion has been approved, and we are now adjourned.
Excellent.
Well, we worked hard tonight.